Tonight we're reading Getting Married. Playing Alice Bridgenorth. Playing
Swachata Guha Mallik.
Playing William Collins.
Thomas Kane.
Playing General Boxer Bridgenorth.
Larry Gutman.
Playing Lesbia Grantham.
Elizabeth Bove.
Playing Reginald Bridgenorth.
Harley Diamond.
Playing Leo Bridgenorth.
Kaitlyn Mitchell.
Playing Bishop Alfred Bridgenorth.
Andresano.
Playing Edith Bridgenorth.
Heather Violanti.
Playing Father Anthony Soames and the Beadle.
Vaswati Mallik.
Playing Mrs. George.
Angela Rodriguez.
Playing St. John HOTCHKISS.
Andrew Dinan.
And playing CECIL SYKES.
David Mackler.
Act 1, Scene 1. Mrs. Bridgenorth reads placidly. Collins counts. A blackbird sings in the garden. Mrs. Bridgenorth puts the Times down in her lap and considers Collins for a moment.
Hello.
And Mrs. Bridgenorth? I'm sorry, who's playing Mrs. Bridgenorth? Is that Swachata?
Oh, there she is.
Do you never feel nervous on these occasions, Collins?
Oh, Lord bless you, no, ma'am. It would be a joke after marrying 5 of your daughters, if I was to get nervous over marrying the last of them.
I have always said you were a wonderful man, Collins.
Oh, ma'am.
Yes, I never could arrange anything, a wedding or even dinner, without the same hitch or other.
Why should you give yourself the trouble, ma'am? Send for the greengrocer, ma'am. That's the secret of easy housekeeping. Bless you, it's his business. It pays him and you, let alone the pleasure in a house like this. Ah, they joke about
I have to, sorry, say this. I cannot hear anything. I just cannot hear anything.
Oh, dear.
I'm sorry, can you raise your speakers? Because everything is fine here.
Anything.
Now.
Yes. So
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we start from the first line? Is that fine?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Go ahead. You're the first line.
Yes. Just a second. I think there. Don't you feel nervous on this kind of occasion?
Oh, Lord bless you, no, ma'am. It would be a joke after marrying 5 of your daughters if I was to get nervous over marrying the last one.
I have always said you were a wonderful man, Collins.
Oh, ma'am.
Yes, I never could arrange anything, a wedding or even dinner, without some hitch or other.
Why should you give yourself the trouble, ma'am? Send for the greengrocer. Send for the greengrocer, ma'am. That's the secret of easy housekeeping. Bless you, it's his business. It pays him and you, let alone the pleasure in a house like this. Ah. They joke about the greengrocer as they joke about the mother-in-law, but they can't get on without either one.
What a bond between us, Collins.
Oh, bless you, ma'am. There are all sorts of bonds between all sorts of people. You are a very affable lady, ma'am, for a bishop's lady. I have known bishop's ladies that would fairly provoke you to up and cheek them, but nobody would ever forget himself and his place with you, ma'am.
Collins, you are a flatterer. You will superintend the breakfast yourself as usual, of course, won't you?
Yes, yes, bless you, ma'am. Of course, I always do. Them fashionable caterers send down such people as I never did set eyes on. Dukes you would take them for. You see the relatives shaking hands with them and asking them about the family. Actually, ladies saying, well, have we met before? And all sorts of confusion. That's my secret in business, ma'am. You can always spot me as the greengrocer. It's a fortune to me in these days when you can hardly tell who one is and isn't. The general, ma'am.
Ah. Good morning, Boxer. Another niece to give away. This is the last of them.
Oh, yes, Alice. Nothing for the old warrior uncle to do but give away brides to luckier men than himself. Has your sister come yet?
Why do you always call Lesbia my sister? Don't you know that it annoys her more than any of the rest of your tricks?
Tricks? Ah, well, I'll try to break myself of it. But I think she might bear with me in a little thing like that. She knows that her name sticks in my throat. Better call her your sister than to try to call her well, call her by her name and make a fool of myself by crying.
Oh, come, Boxer, really? Really? We are no longer boys and girls. You can't keep up a broken heart all your life. It must be nearly 20 years since she refused you. And you know that it's not because she dislikes you, but only that she's not a marrying woman.
Well, it's no use. I love her still, and I can't help telling her so whenever we meet, though I know it makes her avoid me.
What does she say when you tell her?
Only that she wonders when I am going to grow out of it. I know now that I shall never grow out of it.
Perhaps you would if you married her. I believe you better as you are, Boxer.
Oh, I'm a miserable man. I'm really sorry to be a ridiculous old bore, Alice, but when I come to this house for a wedding, to these scenes, to recollections of the past, always to give the bride to somebody else and never to have my bride given to me. May I go into the garden and smoke it off?
Do, Boxer.
Collins returns with the wedding cake.
Oh, here's the cake. I believe it's the same one we had for Florence's wedding.
I can't bear it.
Well, look at that, ma'am. Ain't it odd that after all the weddings he's given away at, the general can't stand the sight of a wedding cake yet? It always seems to give him the same shock.
Well, it's his last shock. You have married the whole family now, Collins.
Except your sister, ma'am. A fine character of a lady, ma'am, is Miss Grantham. I have an ambition to arrange her wedding breakfast.
She won't marry, Collins.
God bless you, ma'am. They all say that. You and me said it. I'll lay I did anyhow.
No, marriage came natural to me. I should have thought it did to you too.
No, ma'am. It didn't come natural. My wife had to break me into it. It came natural to her. She's what you might call a regular old hen. Always want to have her family within sight of her. Wouldn't go to bed unless she knew they were all safe at home and the door locked and the lights out. Always wants her luggage in the carriage with her. Always goes and makes the engine driver promise her to be careful. She's a born wife and mother, ma'am. That's why my children all ran away from home.
Did you ever feel inclined to run away, Collins?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Very often. But when it came to the point, I couldn't bear to hurt her feelings. She's a sensitive, affectionate, anxious soul, and she was never brought up to know what freedom it is to some people. You see, family life is all she knows. She's like a bird born in a cage that wouldn't die if you let it loose in the woods. When I thought how little it was to a man of my easy temper to put up with her, and how deep it would have hurt her, to think it was because I didn't care for her. I always put off running away till next time. And so in the end, I never ran away at all. I dare say it was good for me to be took such good care of, but it cut me off from my old friends. Something dreadful, ma'am, especially the women, ma'am. She never gave them a chance. She didn't, indeed. She never understood. Married people should take holidays from one another if they are to keep at all fresh. Not that I ever got tired of her, ma'am, but my, how I used to get tired of home life sometimes. I used to catch myself enjoying my brother George. I positively did. I mean, ma'am. Oh.
George was a bachelor then, I suppose.
Oh, bless you, no, ma'am. He married a very fine figure of a woman, but she was that changeable and what you might call susceptible you would not believe. She didn't seem to have any control over herself when she fell in love. She would mope for a couple of days, crying about nothing, and then she would up and say, no matter who was there to hear her, I must go to him, George. And away she would go from her home and her husband without your leave or by your leave.
But do you mean that she did this more than once, that she came back?
Oh, bless you, ma'am. She's done it 5 times to my own knowledge. And then George gave up telling about it. He got so used to it.
but did he always take her back?
Well, what could he do, ma'am? 3 times out of 4, the men would bring her back the same evening, and no harm done. Other times they'd run away from her. What could any man with a heart do but comfort her when she came back crying at the way they dodged her when she threw herself at their heads, pretending they were too noble to accept the sacrifice she was making. George told her again and again that if she'd only stay at home and hold off a bit, they'd be at her feet all day long. She got sensible at last and took his advice. George always liked the change of company.
What an odious woman, Collins. Don't you think so?
Well, many ladies with a domestic turn thought so and said so, ma'am. But I will say for George that the variety of experience made her wonderful interesting. That's where the flighty ones score off the steady ones, ma'am. Look at my old woman. She's never known any man but me, and she can't probably know me because she doesn't know other men to compare me with. Of course, she knows her parents in the way one does know one's parents, not knowing half their lives, as you might say, or ever thinking that they were ever young. And she knew her children as children, and never thought of them as independent human beings until they ran away. And nigh broke her heart for a week or 2. But Mrs. George came to know a lot of men of all sorts and ages. For the older she got, the younger she liked them. And it certainly made her interesting and gave her a lot of sense. I've often taken her advice on things when my own poor old woman wouldn't have been a bit of use to me.
I hope you don't tell your wife that you go elsewhere for advice.
Lord bless you, ma'am. I'm that fond of my old Matilda that I never tell her anything at all for fear of hurting her feelings. You see, she's such an out-and-out wife and mother that she's hardly a responsible human being out of her house, except when she's marketing.
Does she approve of Mrs. George?
Oh, Mrs. George gets round to her. Mrs. George can get round anybody if she wants to. And then Mrs. George is very particular about religion, and she's a clairvoyant.
A clairvoyant?
Oh, yes, ma'am. All you have to do is mesmerize her a bit, and off she goes into a trance. and says the most wonderful things. Not things about herself, but as if it was the whole human race giving you a bit of its mind. Oh, wonderful, ma'am, I assure you. You couldn't think of a game that Mrs. George isn't up to.
Good morning, big sister.
Good morning, dear sister.
Good morning, Collins. How well you are looking, and how young.
Oh, that's only my professional habit at a wedding, miss. You should see me at a political dinner. I look nigh 70. Time's getting along, ma'am. May I send up word from you to Miss Edith to hurry a bit with her dressing?
Do, Collins.
Oh, dear old Collins. Has he told you any stories this morning?
Yes, you were just late for a particularly thrilling invention of his.
About Mrs. George.
Yes, he says she's a clairvoyant.
I wonder whether he really invented Mrs. George or stole her out of some book.
I wonder.
Where's the barmicide?
In the study, working away at his new book. He thinks no more of now of having a daughter married than of having an egg for breakfast.
Ah, Lesbia.
How do you do?
Goes out through the tower.
How are you, Boxer? You look almost as gorgeous as the wedding cake.
Well, I make a point of appearing in uniform whenever I take part in any ceremony as a lesson to the subalterns. It is not the custom in England, but it ought to be.
You look very, very fine, Boxer. What a frightful lot of bravery all these medals must represent.
No, Lesbia, they represent despair and cowardice. I won all the early ones by trying to get killed, and you know why.
But you had a charmed life.
Yes, a charmed life. Bayonets bent on my buckles, bullets passed through me and left no trace. That's the worst of modern bullets. I've never been hit by a dum-dum. When I was only a company officer, I had at least the right to expose myself to death in the field. Now I'm a general, even that resource is cut off. Listen to me, Lesbia. For the 10th and last time.
Oh, Florence's wedding this morning, 2 years ago, you said for the 9th and last time.
We are 2 years older, Lesbia. I'm 50, you are...
Yes, I know. It's no use, Boxer. When will you be old enough to take no for an answer?
Never, Lesbia, never. You have never given me a real reason for refusing me yet. I once thought it was somebody else. There were lots of fellows after you, but now they've all given it up and married. Lesbia, tell me your secret. Wow!
Oh, you've been smoking. Oh, keep away, you wretch.
But for that pipe, I would not have faced you without breaking down. It has soothed me and nerved me.
Well, it has nerved me to tell you why I'm going to be an old maid.
Oh, don't say that, Lesbia. It's not natural. It's not right. It's...
No closer, Boxer, please. It may not be natural, but it happens all the time. You'll find plenty of women like me if you care to look for them. Women with lots of character and good looks and money and offers who won't and don't get married. Can't you guess why?
I can understand when there is another.
Yes, but there isn't another. Besides, do you suppose I think at any time of my life that the difference between one decent sort of man and another is worth bothering about?
The heart has its preferences, Lesbia. One image and one only gets indelibly...
Yes! Excuse my interrupting you so often, but your sentiments are so correct that I always know what you're going to say before you finish. You see, Boxer, everybody is not like you. You are a sentimental noodle. You don't see women as they really are. You don't see me as I really am. Now, I do see men as they really are. I see you as you really are.
No, don't say that, Lesbia.
I'm a regular old maid. I'm very particular about my belongings. I like to have my own house and to have it to myself. I have a very keen sense of beauty and fitness and cleanliness and order. I am proud of my independence and jealous for it. I have a sufficiently well-stocked mind to be very good company for myself if I have plenty of books and music. The one thing I never could stand is a great lout of a man smoking all over my house and going to sleep in his chair after dinner and untidy everything. Ugh.
But love!
Oh, love. Have you no imagination? Do you think I have never been in love with wonderful men? Heroes, archangels, princes, sages, even fascinating rascals, and have the strangest and adventures with them? Do you know what it is to look at a mere real man after that? A man with his boots in every corner and the smell of his tobacco in every curtain?
Well, but... excuse my mentioning it. Don't you want children?
I ought to have children. I should be a very good mother to children. I believe it would pay the country very well to pay me very well to have children. But the country tells me that I can't have a child in my house without a man in it too. So I tell the country that it will have to do without my children. If I am to be a mother, I really cannot have a man bothering me to be a wife at the same time.
My dear Lesbia, you know I don't wish to be impertinent, but these are not the correct views for an English lady to express.
That is why I don't express them, except to gentlemen who won't take any other answer. The difficulty, you see, is that I am really an English lady and am particularly proud of being one.
I'm sure of that, Lesbia, quite sure of it. I never meant to.
Oh, my dear Boxer, do please try to think of something else than whether you have offended me or whether you are doing the correct thing as an English gentleman. You are faultless and very dull.
That's what's the matter with me. Not clever. A poor, silly soldier man.
The whole matter is very simple. As I say, I am an English lady, by which I mean that I have been trained to do without what I can't have on honorable terms, no matter what it is.
I really don't understand you, Lesbia.
Then why on earth do you want to marry a woman you don't understand?
I don't know. I suppose I love you.
Well, Boxer, you can love me as much as you like, provided you look happy about it and don't bore me. But you can't marry me, and that's all about it.
Oh, it's so frightfully difficult to argue the matter fairly with you without wounding your delicacy by overstepping the bounds of good taste. But surely there are calls of nature.
Yeah, calls of nature. Where are we?
Bottom of 13 at the end of his line.
Sorry, pages. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Boxer.
Well, how am I to express it? Hang it all, Lesbia. Don't you want a husband?
No, I want children. I want to devote myself entirely to my children and not to be their father. The law would not allow me to do that, so I have made up my mind to have neither husband nor children.
But great heavens, the natural appetites.
As I said before, an English lady is not the slave of her appetites. That is what an English gentleman seems incapable of understanding.
Oh, well, if you refuse, you refuse. I shall not ask you again. I'm sorry I returned to the subject.
Oh, don't be cross, Boxer.
I'm not cross, only wounded, Lesbia. When you talk like that, I don't feel convinced. I only feel utterly at a loss.
Well, you know our family rule. When at a loss, consult the greengrocer. And here he is.
Sorry to be so much in and out, miss. I thought Mrs. Bridgeworth was here. The table is now ready for breakfast if she would like to see it.
If you are satisfied, Collins, I am sure she will.
Oh, by the way, Collins, I thought they'd made you an alderman.
So they have, General.
Then where's your gown?
I don't wear it in private life, General.
Why? Are you ashamed of it?
No, General. To tell you the truth, I take pride in it. I can't help it.
Attention, Collins. Come here. Do you see my uniform, all my medals?
Yes, General. They strike the eye, as it were.
They are meant to. Very well. Now, you know, don't you, that your services to the community as a greengrocer are as important, as dignified as mine as a soldier.
I'm sure it's very honorable of you to say so, General.
You also know, don't you, that any man who can see anything ridiculous or unmanly or unbecoming in your work or in your civic roads is not a gentleman, but a jumping, bounding, snorting cad.
Oh, well, strictly between ourselves, General. That is my opinion, General.
Then why not dignify my niece's wedding by wearing your robes?
A bargain's a bargain, General. Mrs. Bridgeworth sent for the greengrocer, not for the alderman. It's just as unpleasant to get more than you bargained for as to get less.
Oh, I'm sure she will agree with me. I attach importance to this as an affirmation of solidarity in the service of the community. The bishop's apron, my uniform, your robes, the church, the army, and the municipality.
Oh, very well, General. I wonder what my wife will say, miss.
What? Is your wife ashamed of your robes?
No, sir, she's not ashamed of them, but she grudged me the money for them. She will be afraid of my sleeves getting into the gravy.
Lesbia, Boxer, here's a pretty mess.
What's the matter?
Reginald's in London and wants to come to the wedding.
Well, dash my buttons.
Oh, all right, let him come.
Let him come? Why, the decree has not been made absolute yet. Is he to walk in here to Edith's wedding, reeking from the divorce court?
It's too bad. No, I can't forgive him. Lesbia, really? A man of Reginald's age with a young wife, the best of girls, and as pretty as she can be, to go off with a common woman from the streets. Ugh.
You must make allowances. What can you expect? Reginald was always weak. He was brought up to be weak. The family property was all mortgaged when he inherited it. He had to struggle along in constant money difficulties, hustled by his solicitors, morally bullied by the Barmecide, and physically bullied by Boxer, while they two were fighting their way and getting all well trained. You know very well he couldn't afford to marry until the mortgages were cleared, and he was over 50. And then, of course, he made a fool of himself marrying a child like Leo.
But to hit her, absolutely to hit her. He knocked her down, knocked her flat down on a flower bed in the presence of his gardener. He, the head of the family, the man who stands before the Barmecide and myself as Bridgenorth of Bridgenorth, to beat his wife and go off with a low woman and be divorced for it in the face of all England, in the face of my uniform and Alfred's apron. I can never forgive what I felt. It was only the king's personal request, virtually a command, that stopped me from resigning my commission. I'd cut Reginald dead if I met him in the street.
Besides, Leo's coming. They'd meet. It's impossible, Lesbia.
Oh, I forgot that. That settles it. He mustn't come.
Of course he mustn't. You tell him that if he enters this house, I'll leave it, and so will every decent man and woman in it.
Collins.
Oh, here we are. Mr. Reginald, ma'am.
Well, dash my buttons!
Good morning. How do, Alice? Why so me, General? Oh, Reggie, what will the King's proctor say?
Where are we?
No.
Yeah.
Reginald. It's Reginald who comes in.
Bottom of 17.
Bottom of
Reginald.
17.
Alice, it's no use. I can't stay away from Edith's wedding. Good evening, Lesbia. How are you, Boxer?
I was just telling Alice, sir, that if you entered this house, I should leave it.
Ah, well, don't let me detain you, old chap.
Uh,
When you start calling people sir, you're not particularly good company.
Don't you begin to quarrel. That won't improve the situation.
I think you might have waited until you got my answer, Reggie.
It's so jolly easy to say no in a letter. Won't you let me stay?
How can I? Leo's coming.
Well, she won't mind.
Won't mind?
Don't talk nonsense, Reggie, and be off with you.
At school, you led a theory that women like being knocked down, I remember.
Oh, you're a nice, chivalrous, brotherly sort of swine you are.
Mrs. Bridgeworth, are you going to leave this house? Mr. Bridgeworth, are you going to leave this house, or am I?
You are, I hope.
Alice, will you allow me to be driven from Edith's wedding by
Oh,
this,
boxer.
by this respondent? Is Edith to be given away by him?
Certainly not. Reginald, you were not asked to come, and I have asked you to go. You know how fond I am of Leo, and you know what she would feel if she came in and found you here.
Mrs. Reginald, ma'am.
No, ask her. Oh,
Well, dash my buttons!
Oh.
Good morning. How do, Alice? Why so gloomy, General? Oh, Reggie, what will the King's proctor say?
Ah, damn the King's proctor.
No. Any of you tell? Mwah.
Oh, don't begin bothering about those.
Oh, have you kept your promises? Have you rubbed your head with the lotion each night?
Ah, yes, nearly every night.
Nearly. I know what that means. Have you worn your liver pad?
Leo, forgiveness is one of the most beautiful traits in a woman's nature, but there are things that should not be forgiven to a man. When a man knocks a woman down,
Oh.
The man that would raise his hand to a woman, save in the way of a kindness, is unworthy the name of Bridgeworth North.
oh, well, if Leo does not mind, of course, I have no more to say. But I think you might, out of consideration for the family, beat your wife in private and not in the presence of the gardener.
Ah, what's the good of beating your wife unless there's a witness to prove it afterwards? You don't suppose a man beats his wife for the fun of it, do you? How could she have got her divorce if I hadn't beaten her? Nice state of things, that.
Do you mean to tell me that you did it in cold blood simply to get rid of your wife?
No, I didn't. I did it to get her rid of me. What would you do if you were fool enough to marry a woman 30 years younger than yourself and then found that she didn't care for you and was in love with a young fellow with a face like a mushroom?
He has not. And you are most unkind to say I didn't care for you. Nobody could have been fonder of you.
a nice way of showing your fondness. I had to go out and dig that flower bed all over with my hands to soften it. I had to pick all the stones out of it. And then she complained that I hadn't done it properly because she got a worm down her neck. I had to go to Brighton with a poor creature who took a fancy to me on the way down and got conscientious scruples about committing perjury after dinner. I had to put her down in the hotel book as Mrs. Reginald BRIDGENORTH, Leo's name. Do you know what that feels like to a decent man? Do you know what a decent man feels about his wife's name? How would you like to go into a hotel before all the waiters and people with that on your arm? Not that it was the poor girl's fault, of course, only she started crying because I couldn't stand her touching me, and now she keeps writing to me. And then I'm held up in the public court for cruelty and adultery and turned away from Edith's wedding by Alice and lectured by you, a bachelor, and a precious green one at that. What do you know about it?
Am I to understand that the whole case was one of collusion?
Of course it was. Half the cases are collusions. What are people to do? And what do you take me for, that you should have the cheek to pretend to believe all that rot about my knocking Leo about and leaving her for ugh, you should have seen her.
This is perfectly astonishing to me. Why did you do it? Why did Leo allow it?
Well, you better ask her.
I'm sure I it's so horrid for Reggie. Honorably to do it myself and let him divorce me, but he wouldn't. And he said himself that it was the only way to do it, that it was the law that he should do it that way. I never saw that hateful creature until that day in court. If he had only shown her to me before, I should never have allowed it.
You did all this for Leo's sake, Reggie?
I shouldn't mind a bit if it were for Leo's sake, but to have to do it to make room for that mushroom-faced serpent.
What right had he to be made room for? Are you in your senses? What right?
Oh, the right of being a young man suitable to a young woman. I had no right at my age to marry Leo. She knew no more about life than a child.
I knew a great deal more about it than a great baby like you. I'm sure I don't know how you'll get on with no one to take care of you. I often lie awake at night thinking about it. And now you've made me thoroughly miserable.
Serve you right. Oh, there, don't get into a tantrum, Leo.
May one ask, who is the mushroom-faced serpent?
He isn't!
St. John HOTCHKISS, of course.
St. John HOTCHKISS? Why, he's coming to the wedding.
What? In that case, I'm off.
No, you shan't.
No, don't go, old chap.
Better stay, Reginald. You must meet him sooner or later.
Oh,
A moment ago, when I wanted to stay, you were all shoving me out the house. Now that I want to go, you won't let me.
Oh, do stay, Reggie.
Oh, Alice.
Oh, well. Let her have her way. Let her have her mushroom. Let him come. Let them all come.
It's so cruel of you to go on pretending that I don't care for you, Reggie.
She explained to me that it was only that she had exhausted my conversation.
Oh, my dear girl. All the conversation in the world has been exhausted long ago. Heaven knows, I have exhausted the conversation of the British Army these 30 years. but I don't leave it on that account.
It's not that I've exhausted it, but he will keep on repeating it whenever I want to read or go to sleep. And St. John amuses me. He's so clever.
Ah, the old complaint. You all want geniuses to marry. This demand for clever men is ridiculous. Somebody must marry the plain, honest, stupid fellows. Have you thought of that?
But there are such lots of stupid women to marry. Why do they want to marry us? Besides, Reggie knows that I'm quite fond of him. I like him because he wants me, and I like St. John because I want him. I feel that I have a duty to Reggie.
Precisely, you have.
And, of course, St. John has the same duty to me.
Tut, tut.
Oh, how silly the law is. Why can't I marry them both?
Leo!
Well, I love them both. I should like to marry a lot of men. I should like to have Reggie for every day, and St. John for concerts and theatres and going out in the evenings, and some great austere saint for about once a year at the end of the season, and some perfectly blithering idiot of a boy to be quite wicked with. I so seldom feel wicked, and when I do, it's such a pity to waste it merely because it's too silly to confess to a real grown-up man.
This is the kind of thing, you know. Well, there it is.
Alice, this is the job for the Barmecide. He's the bishop. It's his duty to talk to Leo. I can stand a great deal, but when it comes to flat polygamy and polyandry, we ought to do something.
Do come here a moment, Alfred. We are in difficulty.
Ask Collins, I'm busy.
Collins won't do. It's something very serious. Do come just a moment, dear.
Good morning, my dear. Hello, you brought Reginald with you. That's very nice of you. Have you reconciled them, Boxer?
Reconcile them? Why, man, the whole divorce was a put-up job. She wants to marry some fellow named HOTCHKISS.
Fellow with a face like...
You shan't, Reggie. He has a very fine face.
And now she says she wants to marry both of them and a lot of other people as well.
I didn't say I wanted to marry them. I only said I should like to marry them.
Quite a nice distinction, Leo.
Just occasionally, you know.
Quite so. Sometimes a poet, sometimes a bishop, sometimes a fairy prince, sometimes somebody quite indescribable, and sometimes nobody at all.
Yes, that's just it. How do you know?
Oh, I would say most imaginative and cultivated young women feel like that. I wouldn't give a rap for one who didn't. Shakespeare pointed out long ago that a woman wanted a Sunday husband as well as a weekday one, but, as usual, he didn't follow up on the idea.
Am I to understand that...
Now, Boxer, am I the bishop or are you?
You.
Then don't ask me, are you to understand? Yours not to reason why, yours but to do and die.
Oh, very well. Go on. I'm not clever, only a silly soldier man. Go on.
Alfred, don't tease Boxer.
If we are going to discuss ethical questions, we must begin by giving the devil fair play. Boxer never does. England never does. We always assume that the devil is guilty, and we won't allow him to prove his innocence because it would be against public morals if he succeeded. We used to do the same with prisoners accused of high treason, and the consequence is that we overreach ourselves and the devil gets the better of us after all. Perhaps that's what most of us intend of him anyway.
Alfred, we asked you here to preach to Leo. You are preaching at me instead. I am not conscious of having said or done anything that calls for that unsolicited attention.
But Poor little Leo has only told the simple truth, whilst you, Boxer, are striking moral attitudes.
I suppose that's an epigram. I don't understand epigrams. I'm only a silly soldier man. Ha! But I can put a plain question. Is Leo to be engaged to be a polygamist?
Remember the British Empire, Boxer. You're a British general, you know.
What does that have to do with polygamy?
Well, the great majority of our fellow subjects are polygamists. I can't, as a British bishop, insult them by speaking disrespectfully of polygamy. It's a very interesting question. Many very interesting men have been polygamists. Solomon, Mahomet, and our friend the Duke of, I can never remember his name.
It would become you better, Alfred, to send that silly girl back to her husband and her duty than to talk clever and mock at your religion. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Remember that.
Don't be afraid, Boxer. What God hath joined together, no man ever shall put asunder. God will take care of that. By the way, who was it that joined you and Reginald, my dear?
It was that awful little curate that afterwards drank and travelled first class with a third-class ticket, and then tried to go on the stage. But they wouldn't have him. He called himself Egerton Fotheringay.
Well, whom Egerton Fotheringay hath joined, let Sir Gorrel Barnes put asunder by all means.
I may be a silly soldier man, but I call this blasphemy.
Better for me to take the name of Mr. Egerton Fotheringay in earnest than for you to take a higher name in vain.
Can't you three brothers ever meet without quarrelling?
This is not quarrelling, Lesbia. It's only English family life. Good morning.
You know, Bishop, it's very dear of you to take my part, but I'm not sure that I'm not a little shocked.
Then I think I've been a little more successful than Boxer in getting you into a proper frame of mind.
Oh.
Not a bit, for now I'm going to shock you worse than ever. I think Solomon was an old beast.
Precisely what you ought to think of him, my dear. Don't apologize.
Well, but hang it, Solomon was in the Bible. And after all, Solomon was Solomon.
And I stick to it. I still want to have a lot of interesting men to know quite intimately, to say everything I think of to them, and have them say everything they think of to me.
So you shall, my dear, if you are lucky. But, you know, you needn't marry them all. Think of all the buttons we would have to sew on. Besides, nothing is more dreadful than a husband who keeps telling you everything he thinks and always wants to know what you think.
Well, that's very true of Reggie. In fact, that's why I had to divorce him.
Yes, he repeats himself dreadfully, doesn't he?
Look here, Alfred. If I have my faults, let her find them out for herself without your help.
She has found them all out already, Reginald.
After all, there are worse men than Reginald. I dare say he's not so clever as you, but still he's not such a fool as you seem to think him.
Quite right, dear. Stand up for your husband. I hope you will always stand up for all your husbands.
Please don't talk at me as if I wanted to marry a whole regiment. For me, there can never be more than two. I shall never love anybody but Reggie and St. John.
A man with a face like a mushroom.
It's disgusting.
See, my dear, you'll exhaust St. John's conversation too in a week or so. A man is like a photograph with a half a dozen records. You'll soon get tired of them all. And yet, you have to sit at table whilst he reels them off to every new visitor. In the end, you have to be content with his common humanity. And when you come down to it, you'll find out about men what a great English poet of my acquaintance used to say about women, that they all taste alike. Marry whom you please. At the end of a month, he'll be Reginald all over again. It wasn't worth changing. Indeed, it wasn't.
then it's a mistake to get married.
It is, my dear, but it's a much bigger mistake not to get married.
Ah, you hear that, Lesbia?
That's only an epigram, Boxer.
Sound sense, Lesbia. When a man talks rot, that's an epigram. When he talks sense, then I agree with him.
It's getting late. Where's Edith? Hasn't she got into her veil and orange blossoms yet?
Do go and hurry her, Lesbia.
Yes, come with me, Leo.
Yes, certainly.
Right, quiet down, dog. Alice, I've had another letter from the mysterious lady who I can't spell. I like that woman's letters. There's an intensity of passion in them that fascinates me.
Do you mean incognita passionata?
Yes.
You mean to say that women write love letters to you?
Of course.
They never do to me.
The army doesn't attract women, the church does.
Unmute.
No, that was to the dog. Ah, do you consider it right to let them? They may be married women, you know.
They always are. This one is. Don't you think her letters are quite the best love letters I get? Poor Alice has to read my love letters aloud to me at breakfast when they're worth it.
There really is something fascinating about incognita. She never gives her address. That's a good sign.
No assignations, you mean?
Oh, yes. She began the correspondence by making a very curious but very natural assignation. She wants me to meet her in heaven. I hope I shall.
Well, I must say I hope not, Alfred. I hope not.
She says she is happily married and that love is a necessary of life to her, but that she must have high above all her lovers.
Yes, several apparently.
Some great men who will never know her, never touch her as she is on earth, but whom she can meet in heaven, and when she has risen above all the everyday vulgarities of earthly love.
Excellent. Very good for her. And no trouble for me, no trouble to me. Everybody ought to have one of these idealizations, like Dante's Beatrice.
Oh, Alice, will you come upstairs? Edith is not dressed.
Not dressed? Does she know what hour it is?
She has locked herself in her room, reading.
Reading?
What is she reading?
Some pamphlets that came by the 11 o'clock post. She won't come out. She won't open the door. She says she doesn't know whether she's going to be married or not till she's finished the pamphlet. Did you ever hear such a thing? Do come and speak to her.
Alfred, you had better go.
Try Collins.
We've tried Collins already. He got all that I told you out of her through the keyhole. Come, Alice.
Oh, this needs a delay. I shall go back to my work.
What are you working at now?
A chapter in my history of marriage. I'm just at the Roman business, you know.
Not more ritualism, I hope, Alfred.
No, I mean ancient Rome. I've just come to the period when the propertied classes refused to get married and went in for marriage settlements instead. A few of the oldest families stuck to the marriage tradition so as to keep up the supply of vestal virgins who had to be legitimate, but nobody else dreamt of getting married. It's all very interesting because we're coming to that here in England, except that we accept that as we don't require any vestal virgins, nobody will be getting married. No one will get married at all, except the poor, perhaps.
You take it devilishly coolly. Reginald, do you think the Barmecide's quite sane?
No worse than ever he was.
Do you mean to say you believe such a thing will ever happen in England as that respectable people will give up being married?
In England especially they will. In other countries, the introduction of reasonable divorce laws will save the situation. But in England, we will always let an institution strain itself until it breaks. I've told our last 4 prime ministers that if they didn't make our marriage laws reasonable, there would be a strike against marriage, and that it would begin among the propertied classes, where no government would dare to interfere with it.
What did they say to that?
The usual thing. Quite agreed with me, but were sure that they were the only sensible men in the world, and that the least hint of marriage reform would lose them the next election, and then lost it all the same. On cordite, on drink, on Chinese labor in South Africa, on all sorts of trumpery.
Ah, it's no use. They won't listen to our sort. Of course, they have to make you a bishop and Boxer a general, because after all, their blessed rabble of snobs and cads and half-starved shopkeepers can't do government work. And the bounders and weekenders are too lazy and vulgar. They simply rot without us. But what do they ever do for us? What attention do they ever pay to what we say and what we want? I take it that we Bridgenorths are a pretty typical English family of the sort that has always set things straight and stuck up for the right to think and believe according to our conscience. But nowadays we are expected to dress and eat as the weekend bounders do, and to think and believe as the converted cannibals of Central Africa do, and to lie down and let every slob and every cad and every half-penny journalist walk over us. Why, there's not a newspaper in England today that represents what I call solid Bridgenorth opinion and tradition. Half of them read as if they were published at the nearest mothers' meeting, and the other half at the nearest motor garage. Do you call these chaps gentlemen? Do you call them Englishmen? I don't.
You see my uniform. What did Collins say? It strikes the eye. It was meant to. I put it on expressly to give the modern army bounder a smack in the eye. Somebody has to set a right example by beginning. Well, let it be a Bridgenorth. I believe in family, blood, and tradition, my George.
Who will begin the stand against marriage? It must come someday. I was married myself before I'd thought about it. And even if I had thought about it, I was too much in love with Alice to let anything stand in the way. But you know, I've seen one of our daughters after another, Ethel, Jane, Fanny, and Christina, and Florence, go out at that door in their veils and orange blossoms, and I've always wondered whether they'd have gone quietly if they'd known what they were doing. I have a horrible misgiving about that pamphlet. All progress means war with society. Heaven forbid that Edith should become one of the combatants.
Mr. HOTCHKISS.
Well, Goodaloo, Reggie.
Morning.
Good morning, Bishop.
What on earth are you doing here, St. John? You belong to the bridegroom's party. You've no business here until after the ceremony.
Yes, I know that's just it. May I have a word with you in private? Reggie or any of the other family won't matter, but...
All right, St. John. This is our brother, General Bridgenorth.
Oh, good. Are you, as you are in the service, allow me to introduce myself. Oh, do read my card, please.
Mr. St. John HOTCHKISS, the celebrated coward, late lieutenant in the 165th Fusiliers.
Ah, he was sent back from South Africa because he flunked an order to attack and spoiled his commanding officer's plan.
Ah, I remember the case now. I had forgotten the name. I'll not refuse your acquaintance, Mr. Hotchkiss, partly because you're my brother's guest, and partly because I've seen too much active service not to know that every man's nerve plays him false at one time or another, and that some very honorable men should never go into action at all because they're not built that way. But if I were you, I should not use that visiting card. No doubt it's an honorable trait in your character that you don't wish any man to give you his hand in ignorance of your disgrace. But you had better allow us to forget. We wish to forget. It isn't your disgrace alone. It's a disgrace to the army and to all of us. Pardon my plain speaking.
My dear General, I don't know what fear means in the military sense of the word. I fought 7 duels with a saber in Italy and Austria and one with pistols in France without turning a hair. There was no other way in which I could vindicate my motives in refusing to make that attack at Smuts-Fontaine. I don't pretend to be a brave man. I'm afraid of wasps. I'm afraid of cats, in spite of the voice of reason. I'm afraid of ghosts, and twice I've fled across Europe from a false alarm of cholera. But afraid to fight, I am not. Reggie?
Then why did you not do your duty at Smuts-Fontaine?
I did my duty, my higher duty. If I had made that attack, my commanding officer's plan would have been successful, and he would have been promoted. Now, I happen to think that the British Army should be commanded by gentlemen and by gentlemen alone. This man was not a gentleman. I sacrificed my military career. I faced disgrace and social ostracism rather than give that man his chance.
Your commanding officer, sir, was my friend, Major Billiter.
Precisely.
And pray, sir, on what ground do you dare allege that Major Billiter is not a gentleman?
By an infallible sign, one of those trifles that stamp a man. He eats rice pudding with a spoon.
Confound you, I eat rice pudding with a spoon.
Oh, so do I, frequently. But there are ways of doing these things. Billiter's way was unmistakable.
Well, I'll tell you something now. When I thought you were only a coward, I pitied you and would have done what I could to help you back to your place in society.
Thank you, I haven't lost it. My motives have been fully appreciated. I was made an honorary member of 2 of the smartest clubs in London when the truth came out.
Well, sir, those clubs consist of snobs, and you are a jumping, bounding, prancing, snorting snob yourself.
My dear boxer.
How kind of you to say so, General. You're quite right. I am a snob, and why not? The whole strength of England lies in the fact that the enormous majority of the English people are snobs. They insult poverty. They despise vulgarity. They love nobility. They admire exclusiveness. They will not obey a man from their ranks. They never trust one of their own class. And I agree with them. I share their instincts. In my undergraduate, I was a Republican, a socialist. I tried hard to feel toward a common man as I feel towards a duke. I couldn't. Neither can you. Well, why should we be ashamed of this aspiration towards what is above us? Why don't I say, an honest man is the noblest work of God? Because I don't think so. If he's not a gentleman, I don't care whether he's honest or not. I shouldn't let his son marry my daughter, and that's the test. Mind, that's the test. You feel as I do. You are a snob in fact. I am a snob, not only in fact, but on principle. I shall go down in history not as the first snob, but as the first avowed champion of English snobbery and its first martyr in the army. The Navy boasts 2 such martyrs in Captains Kirby and Wade, who were shot for refusing to fight under Admiral Bonbow, a promoted cabin boy. I have always envied them their glory.
As a British general, sir, I have to inform you that if any officer under my command violated the sacred equality of our profession by putting a single jot of his duty or his risk on the shoulders of the humblest drummer boy, I'd shoot him with my own hand.
That sentiment is not your equality, General, but your superiority. Ask the bishop.
I can't support you, St. John. My profession also compels me to turn my back on snobbery. You see, I have to do such a terribly democratic thing to every child that is brought to me. Without distinction of class, I have to confer on rank so high and awful that all the grades in Debrett and Burke seem like the medals they give children in infant schools in comparison. I'm not allowed to make any class distinction. They are all soldiers and servants, not officers and masters.
Ah, you're quoting the baptism service. That's not a bit real, you know. If I may say so, you would both feel so much more at peace with yourselves if you would acknowledge and confess your real convictions. You know you don't really think a bishop the equal of a curate, nor a lieutenant in a line regiment the equal of a general.
Of course I do. I was a curate myself.
I was a lieutenant in a line regiment.
And I was nothing. But we're all our own and one another's weakballs. And so perhaps when you've done thinking, when you've quite done talking about yourselves, we shall get to whatever business St. John came about.
My dear fellow, I beg 1,000 pardons. Oh, true. It's about the wedding.
What about the wedding?
Well, we can't get our man out up to the sentinels. Cecil has locked himself in his room and won't see or speak to anyone. I went up to his room and banged on the door. I told him I should look through the keyhole if he didn't answer. I looked through the keyhole. He was sitting on his bed reading a book. I told him not to be an ass and so forth, and he said he was not going to budge until he had finished the book. I asked him, did he know what time it was and whether he happened to recollect that he had a rather important appointment to marry Edith? He said, the sooner I stopped interrupting him, the sooner he'd be ready. Then he stuffed his fingers in his ears, turned over on his elbows, and buried himself in his beastly book. I couldn't get another word out of him, so I thought it better to come here and warn you.
This looks to me like they've arranged it between them.
No, Edith has no sense of humor. And I've never seen a man in a jocular mood on his wedding morning.
Mr. Cecil Sykes.
Look here, Cecil, this is all wrong. You've no business here until after the wedding. Hang it, man, you're the bridegroom.
I've come here to say this. When I proposed to Edith, I was in utter ignorance of what I was getting myself in for legally. Having given my word, I will stand to it. You have me at your mercy. Marry me if you insist. But take notice that I protest.
What the devil do you mean by this? What the...
Easy, Reggie, easy, old man. So steady, 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 steady.
Found your impertinence. What do you... Oh.
General.
No,
you.
please, Reg.
No, go ahead.
No, please, Reg, control yourself, Box. I beg you.
I tell you, I can't control myself. I've been controlling myself for the last half hour till I feel like bursting.
That's just it, Bishop. Edith is her uncle's niece. She can't control herself any more than they can. And she's a bishop's daughter. That means she's engaged in social work of all sorts, organizing shop assistants and sweated work girls and all that. When her blood boils about it, and it boils about once a week, she doesn't care what she says.
Well, you knew that when you proposed to her.
Yes, but I didn't know that when we were married, I should be legally responsible if she libeled anybody. Though all her property is protected against me as if I were the lowest thief and cager. This morning, somebody sent me Belford Bax's essays on men's wrongs, and they have been a perfect eye-opener to me. Bishop, I'm not thinking of myself. I would face anything for Edith. But my mother and sisters are wholly dependent on my property. I'd rather have cut off an inch from my right arm than 100 a year from my mother's income. I owe everything to her care of me.
Cecil, I heard your voice. I must speak to you very particularly. Papa, go away. Go away, everybody.
I think there can be no doubt that Edith wishes us to retire. Come.
That's it, you see. It's just this outspokenness that makes my position hard, much as I admire her for it.
Do you want me to flatter and be untruthful?
No, not exactly that.
Does anybody want me to flatter and be untruthful?
Well, since you ask me, I do. Surely it's the very first qualification for tolerable social intercourse.
I hope you will always tell me the truth, my darling, at all events.
You can depend on me for that, Uncle Boxer.
Are you sure you have an adequate idea of what the truth about a military man really is?
What's the truth about you, I wonder?
Oh, quite unfit for publication in its entirety. If Miss Bridgenorth begins telling it, I shall have to leave the room.
I'm not at all surprised to hear it. But what's it got to do with our business here today? Is it you that's going to be married, or is it Edith?
I'm so sorry. I get so interested in myself that I thrust myself into the front of every discussion in the most insufferable way. But, my dear Reggie, are you quite sure that Miss Bridgenorth is going to be married? Are you, Miss Bridgenorth?
Yes, here she is, of course. I told you I heard her dash downstairs.
Cecil.
And St. John.
Edith, Edith wishes to speak to Cecil. Let us go into my study.
But she must come and dress. Look at the hour.
Come, Leo dear.
Do you know, Miss Bridgenorth, I should most awfully like to hear what you have to say to poor Cecil.
Well,
Who is poor Cecil, pray?
Well, one always calls a man that on his wedding morning. I don't know why. I'm his best man, you know. Don't you think it gives me a certain right to be present in Cecil's interest?
There is such a thing as delicacy, Mr. Hotchkiss.
There is such a thing as curiosity, General.
Delicacy is thrown away here, Alfred. Edith, you had better take Sykes into the study.
Of course, I'll go if you wish me to, but Cecil's objection to go through with it was so entirely on public grounds.
His objection?
St. John, you have no right to say that. I expressly said that I'm ready to go through with it.
Cecil, do you mean to say that you have been raising difficulties about our marriage?
I raise no difficulty, but I do beg you to be careful what you say about people. You must remember, my dear, that when we are married, I shall be responsible for everything you say. Only last week you said on a public platform that Slattocks and Chinnery were scoundrels. They could have got £1,000 damages apiece from me for that if we'd been married at the time.
I never said anything of the sort. I never stooped to mere vituperation. What would my girls say of me if I did? I chose my words most carefully. I said they were tyrants, liars, and thieves, and so they are. Slattocks is even worse.
I'm afraid that would be at least £5,000.
If it were only myself, I shouldn't care. But my mother and sisters, I've no right to sacrifice them.
You needn't be alarmed. I'm not going to be married.
Not.
What?
Edith, are you throwing me over?
How can I? You have been beforehand with me.
On my honor, no. All I said was that I didn't know the law when I asked you to be my wife.
And you wouldn't have asked me if you had. Is that it?
No, I should have asked you for my sake to be a little more careful, not to ruin me uselessly.
You think the truth useless.
Much worse than useless, I assure you. Frequently most mischievous.
You hold your tongue. You are a chatterbox and a fool.
Edith, my love.
Okay,
love.
I shall not take an action, Cecil.
Sorry, but you are old enough to know better. And now, since there is to be no wedding, we had better get back to our work. Mamma, will you tell Collins to cut up the wedding cake into 33 pieces for the club girls? My not being married is no reason why they should be disappointed.
If you'll allow me to take Cecil's place, Miss Bridgenorth.
St. John!
Oh, I forgot, I beg your pardon, a prior engagement.
What? You and Leo? I thought so. Well, hadn't you two better get married at once? I don't approve of long engagements. The breakfast's ready, the cake's ready, everything's ready. I'll lend Leo my veil and things.
I'm afraid they must wait until the degree is made absolute, my dear. And the license is not transferable.
Oh, well, it can't be helped. Is there anything else before I go off to the club?
You don't seem much disappointed, Edith. I can't help saying that much.
And you can't help but looking enormously relieved, Cecil. We shan't be any worse friends, shall we?
Of course not. Still, I'm perfectly ready, at least if it were not for my mother. Oh, I don't know what to do. I've been so fond of you, and when the worry of the wedding was over, I should have been so fond of you again.
Come, don't make a scene, dear. You're quite right. I don't think a woman doing public work ought to get married unless her husband feels about it as she does. I don't blame you at all for throwing me over.
No, dash it. I'm not going to stand this. Why is the man always to be put in the wrong? Be honest, Edith. Why weren't you dressed? Were you going to throw him over? If you were, take your fair share of the blame and don't put it all on him.
Would it not be better?
Now look here, HOTCHKISS. Who asked you to cut in? Is your name Edith? Am I your uncle?
Oh, I wish you were. I should so like to have an Uncle Reginald.
Yeah, Sykes. Are you ready to marry Edith, or are you not?
I've already said that I'm quite ready. A promise is a promise.
We don't want to know whether a promise is a promise or not. Can you answer yes or no without spoiling it and setting HOTCHKISS here, grinning like a Cheshire cat? If she puts on her veil and goes to church, will you marry her?
Certainly, yes.
That's all right. Now, Edie, put on your veil and off with you to church. The bridegroom's waiting.
It is understood that Slatux and Chinnery are liars and thieves, and that I hope by next Wednesday to have in my hands conclusive evidence that Slatix is something much worse.
I made no conditions as to that when I proposed to you, and now I can't go back. I hope Providence will spare my poor mother. I say again, I'm ready to marry you.
Then I think you show great weakness of character, and instead of taking advantage of it, I shall set you a better example. I want to know, is this true?
Do you know what you are going to do by a woman who has done it? May I ask, my dear, what she did?
She got married. When she had 3 children, the eldest only 4 years old, her husband committed a murder and then attempted to commit suicide, but only succeeded in disfiguring himself. Instead of hanging him, they sent him to penal servitude for life, for the sake, they said, of his wife and infant children. And she could not get a divorce from that horrible murderer. They would not even keep him imprisoned for life. For 20 years she had to live singly, bringing up the children by her own work, and knowing that just when they were grown up and beginning life, this dreadful creature would be let out to disgrace them all, and prevent the 2 girls from getting decently married, and drive the son out of the country, perhaps. Is that really the law? Am I to understand that if Cecil commits a murder, or forges, or steals, or becomes an atheist, I can't get divorced from him?
Why, yes, my dear, that is so. You must take him for better or worse.
Then I most certainly refuse to enter into any such wicked contract. What sort of servants, what sort of friends, what sort of prime ministers should we have if we took them for better or worse all their lives? We should simply encourage them into every sort of wickedness. Surely my husband's conduct is of more importance to me than Mr. Balfour's or Mr. Asquith's. If I had known the law, I would have never consented. I don't believe any woman would if she realized what she was doing.
But I'm not going to commit murder.
How do you know? I've sometimes wanted to murder Slatix. Have you never wanted to murder somebody, Uncle Reggie?
Yes.
Reggie!
I said yes, and I mean yes. There was one night, HOTCHKISS, when I jolly near shot you, and Leo, and finished up with myself. And that's the truth.
Oh, Reggie!
Be off.
But isn't all this great nonsense? What likelihood is there of any of us committing a crime?
Oh, yes, I assure you. I went into the matter once very carefully, and I found things I have actually done, things that everybody does, I imagine, would expose me, if I were found out and prosecuted, to 10 years penal servitude, 2 years hard labor, and the loss of all civil rights. Not counting that, I'm a private trustee, and like all private trustees, fraudulent one. Otherwise, the widow for whom I am trustee would starve occasionally, and the children would go uneducated. And I'm probably as honest a man as any here.
Do you imply that I have been guilty of conduct that would expose me to penal servitude?
I should think it quite likely, but of course I don't know.
But bless me, marriage is not a question of law, is it? Have you children no affection for one another? Surely that's enough.
Well, if that's enough, why get married?
Stuff, St. John. Of course people must get married. Alfred, why don't you say something? Surely you are not going to let this go on.
I've been waiting for the last 20 minutes, Alfred, in amazement and stupefaction to hear you put a stop to all this. We look to you. It's your place, your office, your duty. Exert your authority at once.
You must give the devil fair play, Boxer. Until you have heard and weighed his case, you have no right to condemn him. I'm sorry you have been kept waiting 20 minutes, but I myself have waited 20 years for this to happen. I've often wrestled with the temptation to pray that it might not happen in my own household. Perhaps it was a presentiment that it might become a part of our old BRIDGENORTH burden that made me to warn our government so earnestly that unless the law of marriage were first made human, it could never become divine.
Oh, do be sensible about this. People must get married. What would you have said if CECIL's parents had not been married?
They were not, my dear.
Hello?
What?
What on earth do you
What
mean?
do you mean?
What
Hello?
on earth do you mean, Bishop? My parents were married.
You can't remember, Cecil.
Oh, well, I never asked my mother to show me her marriage license. If that's what you mean, what man ever has? I never suspected. I never knew. Are you joking? Or have we all gone mad?
Don't be alarmed, Cecil. Let me explain. Your parents were not Anglicans. You were not, I think, Anglican yourself until your second year at Oxford. They were positivists. They went through the positivist ceremony at Newton Hall in Fetter Lane after entering into a civil contract before the registrar of the West Strand district. I ask you, as an Anglican Catholic, was that a marriage?
Great heavens, no! 1,000 times no! I never thought of that. I'm a child of sin.
Oh, come. You are no more a child of sin than any Jew or Mohammedan or nonconformist or anyone else born outside the church. But you see how it affects my view of the situation. To me, there is only one marriage that is holy, the church's sacrament of marriage. Outside that, I can recognize no distinction between one civil contract and another. There was a time when all marriages were made in heaven. But because the church was unwise and would not make its ordinances reasonable, its power over men and women was taken away from it. And marriages gave place to contracts at a registry office. And now that our governments refuse to make these contracts reasonable, those whom we, in our blindness, drove out of the church will be driven out of the registry office. And we shall have the history of ancient Rome repeated. We shall be joined by our solicitors for 7, 14, 21 years, or perhaps months. Deeds of partnership will replace the old vows.
Would you, Bishop, approve of such partnerships?
Do you think that I, a bishop, approve of the Deceased Wives' Sister Act? That did not prevent it becoming law.
But when the government sounded you as to whether you would marry a man to his deceased wife's sister, you very naturally and properly told them that you'd see them damned first.
No, really, Boxer, you must not.
Of course, I don't mean that you used those words, but that was the meaning and the spirit of it.
Not the spirit, Boxer. I protest. But I never mind that. The point is that state marriage is already divorced from church marriage. The relations between Leo and Reggie and St. John are perfectly legal, but you expect me, as a bishop, to approve of them?
Oh, I don't defend Reginald. He should have kicked you out of the house, Mr. HOTCHKISS.
How could I kick him out of the house? He's stronger than me. He could have kicked me out if it came to that. He did kick me out. What else was it but kicking out to take my wife's affections from me and establish himself in my place?
I protest, Reginald. I said all that a man could to prevent the smash.
Oh, I know you did. I don't blame you. People don't do these things to one another. They happen and they can't be helped. What was I to do? I was old, she was young, I was dull, he was brilliant. I had a face like a walnut, he had a face like a mushroom. I was as glad to have him in the house as she was. He amused me, and we were a couple of fools. He gave us good advice, told us what to do when we didn't know. She found out that I wasn't any use to her, and he was. So she nabbed him and gave me the chuck.
If you don't stop talking in that disgraceful way about our married life, I'll leave the room and never speak to you again.
You're not going to speak to me again anyhow, are you? You suppose I'm going to visit you when you marry him?
I hope so. Surely you're not going to be vindictive, Reggie. Besides, you'll have all the advantages I've formerly enjoyed. You'll be the visitor, the relief, the new face, the fresh news, the hopeless attachment. I shall only be the husband.
Will you tell me this, any of you? How is it that we always get talking about HOTCHKISS when our business is about Edith?
Will somebody tell me how the world is to go on if nobody is to get married?
Will somebody tell me what an honorable man and a sincere Anglican is to propose to a woman whom he loves and who loves him and won't marry him?
Will somebody tell me how I'm to arrange to take care of Reggie when I'm married to St. John? Reggie must not be allowed to marry anyone else, especially that odious, nasty creature that told all those wicked lies about him in court.
Let us draw up the first English partnership deed.
For shame, St. John.
Somebody must begin, my dear. I've a very strong suspicion that when it is drawn up, it will be so much worse than the existing law that you will all prefer getting married. I shall therefore be doing the greatest possible service to morality by just trying how the new system would work.
I've been thinking.
Nothing like making people think, is there, St. John?
A woman has no right to refuse motherhood. That is clear after the statistics given in the Times by Mr. Sidney Webb.
Mr. Webb has nothing to do with it. It is the voice of nature.
But if she is an English lady, it is her right and her duty to stand out for honourable conditions. If we can agree on the conditions, I am willing to enter into an alliance with a boxer.
And I with Cecil.
And I with Reggie and St. John.
An alliance? Do you mean a...
He only means bigamy, as I understand her.
Alfred, how long more are you going to stand there and countenance this lunacy? Is it a horrible dream, or am I awake? In the name of common sense and sanity, let us get back to real life.
Sorry to hurry you, my lord, but the church has been full this hour past, and the organist has played all the wedding music in Lohengrin 3 times over.
Ah, the very man we want, Alfred. I'm not equal to this crisis. You're not equal to it. The army has failed. The church has failed. I shall put aside all idle social distinctions and appeal to the municipality.
Do, Boxer. He is sure to get us out of this difficulty.
I have not had the pleasure. Will you introduce me?
Oh, all right, sir. Only the greengrocer, sir, in charge of the wedding breakfast. Mr. Alderman Collins, sir, when I'm in my gown.
Oh, they're very pleased. Indeed.
Personally, I value the counsel of my old friend, Mr. Alderman Collins, very highly. If Edith and Cecil will allow him...
Collins has known me from my childhood. I am sure he will agree with me.
Oh, yes, miss. You may depend on me for that. Might I ask what the difficulty is?
Simply this. Do you expect me to get married in the existing state of the law?
I put it to you as a sensible man. Is it any worse for her than for me?
That's not the point. Let this be understood, Mr. Collins. It's not the man who is backing out, it's the woman.
We do not admit that, Collins. The woman is perfectly ready to make a reasonable arrangement.
With both men.
The case is now before you, Mr. Collins, and I put it to you as one man to another. Did you ever hear such crazy nonsense?
The world must go on, mustn't it, Collins?
Oh, the world will go on, Mom. Don't you be afraid of that. It ain't so easy to stop it as the earnest kind of people think.
I knew you would agree with me, Collins. Thank you.
Have you the least idea what they're talking about, Mr.
Oh, that's all right, sir. The particulars don't matter. I never read the report of a committee, after all. What can they say that you don't know? You pick it up as they go on talking. Well, my lord and Miss Edith and madam and gentlemen, it's like this. Marriage is tolerable enough in its way if you're easygoing and don't expect too much from it. But it doesn't bear thinking about. The great thing is to get the young people tied up before they know what they're letting themselves in for. There's Miss Lesbia now. She waited until she started thinking about it, and then it was all over. If you once start arguing, Miss Edith and Mr. Sykes, you'll never get married. Go and get married first. You'll have plenty of arguing afterwards, miss. Believe me.
Your warning comes too late. They've started arguing already.
Ah.
But you don't take in the full, well, I don't wish to exaggerate, but the only word I can find is the full horror of the situation. These ladies not only refuse our honorable offers, but as I understand it, and I'm sure I beg your pardon most heartily, Lesbia, if I'm wrong, as I hope I am, they actually call on us to enter into, I'm sorry to use the expression, but what can I say, into alliances with them under contracts to be drawn up by our confounded solicitors.
Oh, dear me, General. That's something new, when the parties belong to the same class.
Not new, Collins. The Romans did it.
Yes, they would, them Romans. When you're in Rome, do as the Romans do, is an old saying. But we're not in Rome at present, my lord.
We have got into many of their ways. What do you think of the contract system, Collins?
Well, my lord, there's a question of a contract. I always say, show it to me on paper. If it's to be talk, let it be talk. But if it's to be a contract, down with it in black and white, and then we shall know what we're about.
Quite right, Mr. Alderman. Let us draft it at once. May I go into the study for some writing materials, Bishop?
Do, St. John.
If I may point out a difficulty, my lord.
Certainly. Won't you sit down, Mr. Alderman?
We are at present 6 men to 4 ladies. That's not fair.
Not fair to the men, you mean?
Oh, Reggie has said something clever. Can I be mistaken in him?
Hmm? I want to tell you the truth, my lord and ladies and gentlemen. I don't trust my judgment on this subject. There's a certain lady that I always consult on delicate points like this. She has a very exceptional experience and a wonderful temperament and instinct in affairs of the heart.
Excuse me, Mr. Alderman. I'm a snob, and I warn you that there is no use consulting anyone who will not advise us frankly on class lines. Marriage is good enough for the lower classes. They have facilities for desertion that are denied to us. What is the social position of this lady?
The highest in the borough, sir. She is the mayoress. But you need not stand in awe of her, sir. She is my sister-in-law. I've often spoken of her to you, your lady, my lord. Mrs. George, ma'am.
Do you mean to say, Collins, that Mrs. George is a real person?
Didn't you believe in her, ma'am?
Never for a moment.
Oh.
We always thought that Mrs. George was too good to be true. I still don't believe in her, Collins. You must produce her if you are to convince me.
Well, I'm so taken aback by this that... Well, I never! Why, she's at the church this moment, waiting to see the wedding.
Then produce her. Come, Collins, confess. There's no such person.
There is, my lord. There is, I assure you. You ask George. It's true I can't produce her, but you can, my lord.
I?
Yes, my lord, you. For some reason that I could never make out, she has forbidden me to talk about you or let her meet you. I've asked her to come here of a wedding morning to help with the flowers and the like, and she has always refused. But if you order her to come as a bishop, she'll come. She has some very strange fancies, as Mrs. George. Send your ring to her, my lord, the official ring. Send it by some stylish gentleman. Perhaps Mr. HOTCHKISS would be good enough to take it, and she'll come.
Oblige me by undertaking the mission.
But how am I to know the lady?
She has gone to the church in state, sir, and will be attended by a beadle with a mace. He will point her out to you, and he will take the front seat of the carriage on the way back.
No, 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 no. By heavens, forgive me, Bishop, but you are asking too much. I ran away from the Boers because I was a snob. I run away from the beadle for the same reason. I absolutely decline the mission.
Be good enough to give me that ring, Mr. HOTCHKISS.
Oh, with pleasure.
I shall have the great pleasure, Mr. Alderman, in waiting on the mayoress with the bishop's orders, and I shall be proud to return with municipal honors.
Boxer is rather a fine old josser in his way.
His uniform gives him an unfair advantage. He will take all the attention off the beadle.
I think it would be as well, my lord, to go on with the contract while we're waiting. The truth is, we shall none of us have much of a look in when Mrs. George comes, so we had better finish the writing part of the business before she arrives.
I think I have the preliminaries down all right. Memorandum of agreement made this day of blank blank between blank blank of blank blank in the county of blank Esquire. Here in after called the gentleman of the one part, and blank blank of blank in the county of blank, here in after called the lady of the other part, whereby it is declared and agreed as follows.
You might remember your manners, St. John. The lady comes first.
To be sure, I beg your pardon.
And you have one lady and one gentleman. There ought to be two gentlemen.
Oh, that's a mere matter of form, ma'am. Any number of ladies or gentlemen can be put in.
Not any number of ladies. Only one lady. Besides, that creature wasn't a lady.
You shut your head, Leo. This is a general sort of contract for everybody. It's not your track.
Then what use is it to me?
You will get some hints from it for your own contract.
I hope there will be no hinting. Let us have the plain, straightforward truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, yes, miss, it will be all right. There's nothing underhand, I assure you. It's a model agreement, as it were.
I hope so.
What is the first clause of an agreement usually? You know, Mr. Alderman?
Well, sir, the town clerk always sees to that. I've got out of the habit of thinking for myself in these matters. Perhaps the lordships knows.
I'm sorry to say I don't. Soames will know. Alice, where is Soames?
He's in there.
Coax him to join us, my love. Soames is my chaplain, Mr. Collins. The great difficulties in the Church of England today is that should be capable of sticking to his desk for 16 hours a day. But the result of having bishops of this sort is that the spiritual interests of the church and its influence on souls and imaginations of people very soon begins to go rapidly to the devil.
Papa!
I'm speaking technically, not in the boxer's manner. Indeed, the bishops themselves went so far in that direction that they gained a reputation for being spiritually the stupidest men in the country and commercially the sharpest. I found a way out of this difficulty. Soames was my solicitor. I found that Soames, though a very capable man of business, had a romantic secret history. His father was an eminent nonconformist divine who habitually spoke of the Church of England as the Scarlet Woman. Soames became secretly converted to Anglicanism at the age of 15. He longed to take the holy orders, but didn't dare because his father had a weak heart and habitually threatened to drop dead if anybody hurt his feelings. You may have noticed that people with weak hearts are the tyrants of the English family life, so poor Soames had to become a solicitor. When his father died, by a curious stroke of poetic justice, he died of scarlet fever, and was found to have had a perfectly sound heart, I ordained Soames and made him my chaplain. He is now quite happy. He is a celibate, fasts strictly on Fridays and throughout Lent, wears a cassock and biretta, and has more legal business to do than ever he had in his old office in Ely Place. And he sets me free for the spiritual and scholarly pursuits proper to a bishop.
Here he is.
Yes, take my place, Mr. Soames.
Oh, no longer Mr. Soames, St. John, Father Anthony.
I was christened Oliver Cromwell Soames. My father had no right to do it. I've taken the name of Anthony. When you become parents, young gentlemen, be very careful not to label a helpless child with views which it may come to hold in abhorrence.
Has Alice explained to you the nature of the document we are drafting?
She has indeed.
That sounds as if you disapproved.
It is not for me to approve or disapprove. I do the work that comes to my hand from my ecclesiastical superior.
Don't be uncharitable, Anthony. You must give us your best advice.
My advice to you all is to do your duty by taking the Christian vows of celibacy and poverty. The church was founded to put an end to marriage and to put an end to property.
But how could the word go on, Anthony?
Do your duty and see. Doing your duty is your business. Keeping the world going is in higher hands.
Anthony, you're impossible.
You won't take my advice. I didn't expect you would. Well, I await your instructions.
We got stuck on the first clause. What should we begin with?
It is usual to begin with the term of the contract.
What does that mean?
The term of years for which it is to hold good.
But this is a marriage contract.
Is the marriage to be for a year, a week, or a day?
I say, Anthony, you're worse than any of Fuss. A date.
Off the path is off the path. An inch or a mile, what does it matter?
If the marriage is not to be forever, I'll have nothing to do with it. I call it immoral to have a marriage for a term of years. If the people don't like it, they can get divorced.
It ought to be for just as long as the two people like. That's what I say.
They may not agree on that point, sir. It's often first with one and then loose with the other.
I should say, for as long as the man behaves himself.
I suppose the woman doesn't behave herself.
The woman may have lost all her chances of a good marriage with anybody else. She should not be cast adrift.
Well, maybe the man. What about his home?
The wife ought to keep an eye on him and see that he is comfortable and takes care of himself properly. The other man wants her all the time.
There may not be another man.
Then why on earth should she leave him?
Because she wants to.
If people are going to be let to do what they want to, then I call it simple immorality.
You do it yourself, don't you?
Oh, that's quite different. Don't make foolish witticisms, Reggie.
We don't seem to be getting on. What do you say, Mr. Alderman?
Well, my lord, you see, people do persist in talking as if marriages were all of one sort. But there are almost as many different sorts of marriages as there's different sorts of people. There's the young things that marry for love and not knowing what they're doing. And the old things that marry for money and comfort and companionship. There's the people that marry for children. There's the people who don't intend to have children and that aren't fit to have them. There's the people that marry because there's so much run after by the other sex that they have to put a stop to it somehow. And there's the people that want to try a new experience and the people that want to have done with experiences. How do you please them all? Why, you'll want a half dozen sorts of contract.
Well, if so, let us draw them all up. Let us face it.
Why should we be held together whether we like it or not? That's the question that's at the bottom of it all.
Because of the children, Reggie.
But even then, Mom, why should we be held together when that's all over? When the girls are married and the boys are out in the world and in business for themselves? When that's done with, the real work of the marriage is done with. If two like to stay together, then let them stay together. But if not, let them part, as old people in the workhouses do. They'd had enough of one another. They found one another out. Why should they be tied together to sit there, grudging and hating and spiting one another, like so many do? Put it 20 years from the birth of the youngest child.
How if there be no children?
Let them take one another on liking.
Collins!
You wicked old man.
My dear, my dear.
And what if a woman to live on, and what is a woman to live on, pray, when she is no longer liked, as you call it?
It is proposal that the term of the agreement be 20 years from the birth of the youngest child when there are children. Any amendment?
I protest. It must be for life. It would not be a marriage at all if it were not for life.
Mrs. Reginald Bridgenorth proposes a life. Any seconder?
Don't be soulless, Anthony.
I have a very important amendment. If there are any children, the man must be cleared completely out of the house for 2 years on each occasion. At such times, he is superfluous and ridiculous.
But where is he to go, miss?
He can go where he likes, as long as he does not bother the mother.
And is she to be left lonely?
Lonely? With her child? The poor woman would be only too glad to have a moment to herself. Don't be absurd, Reggie.
That father is to be a wandering, wretched outcast, living at his club and seeing nobody, his friends' wives.
No, poor fellow.
Friends' wives are perhaps the solution of the problem. You see, their husbands will also be outcast, and the poor ladies will occasionally pine for male society.
There is no reason why a mother should not have male society. What she clearly should not have is a husband.
Anything else, Miss Grantham?
Yes, I must have my own separate house, or my own separate part of the house. Boxer smokes. I can't endure tobacco. Boxer believes that an open window means death from cold and exposure to the night air. I must have fresh air always. We can be friends, but we can't live together, and that must be put in the agreement.
I've no objection to smoking, and as to opening the windows, Cecil will of course have to do what is best for his health.
And who will be the judge of that, my dear? You or he?
Neither of us. We must do what the doctor orders.
Ah, Doctor be damned. You take my tip, Anthony. Put a clause into that agreement that the doctor is to have no say in the job. It's bad enough for the two people to be married to one another without their both being married to the doctor as well.
Yeah, that reminds me of something very important. Boxer believes in vaccination. I do not. There must be a clause that I am to decide on such questions as I think best.
Baptism is nearly as important as vaccination, isn't it?
It used to be considered so, my dear.
Well, St. John scoffs at it. He says that godfathers are ridiculous. I must be allowed to decide.
It'd be his children as well as yours, you know.
Don't be indelicate, Reggie.
You are forgetting the very important matter of money.
Ah, money. Now we're coming to it.
When I'm married, I shall have practically no money except what I shall earn.
I'm sorry, Cecil. The bishop's daughter is a poor man's daughter.
But surely you don't imagine that I'm going to let Edith work when we're married. I'm not a rich man, but I've enough to spare her that. And when my mother dies...
What nonsense! Of course I shall work when I'm married. I shall keep your house.
Oh, that.
You call that work?
Don't you? Leo used to do it for nothing, so no doubt you thought it wasn't work at all. Does your present housekeeper do it for nothing?
But it will be part of your duty as a wife.
Not under this contract. I'll not have it so. If I'm to keep the house, I shall expect Cecil to pay me at least as well as he would pay a hired housekeeper. I'll not go begging to him every time I want a new dress or a cab fare, as so many women have to do.
You know very well I would grudge you nothing, Edie.
Then don't grudge me my self-respect and independence. I insist on it in fairness to you, Cecil, because in this way there will be a fund belonging solely to me. And if Slatix takes an action against you for anything I say, you can pay the damages and stop the interest out of my salary.
You forget that under this contract, he will not be liable because you will not be his wife in law.
Nonsense! Of course I should be his wife.
Is Slatos taking an action against you, miss? Slatos is on the council with me. Could I settle it?
He has not taken an action, but Cecil says he will.
What for, miss, if I may ask?
Slatix is a liar and a thief, and it is my duty to expose him.
Oh, you surprise me, miss. Of course Slatix is, in a manner of speaking, a liar. If I may say so without offense, we're all liars. if it was only to spare one another's feelings. But I shouldn't call Slatix a thief. He's not all that he should be, perhaps, but he pays his way.
If that is only your nice way of saying that Slatix is entirely unfit to have 200 girls in his power as absolute slaves, then I shall say that too about him at the very next public meeting I address. He steals their wages under pretense of firing them. He steals their food under pretense of buying it for them. He lies when he denies having done it. And he does other things, as you evidently know, Collins. Therefore, I give you notice that I shall expose him before all England without the least regard to the consequences to myself.
Or to me?
I take equal risk. Suppose you felt it to be your duty to shoot Slatix, what would become of me and the children? I'm sure I don't want anybody to be shot, not even Slatix, but if the public never take any notice of even the most crying evil until somebody is shot, what are people to do but shoot somebody?
I'm waiting for my instructions as to the terms of the agreement.
It's no good talking all over the shop like this. We shall be here all day. I propose that the agreement holds good until the parties are divorced.
They can't be divorced. They will not be married.
I do not like.
But if they can't be divorced, then this will be worse than marriage.
Of course it will. Do stop this nonsense. Why? Who are the children to belong to?
We have already settled that. They are to belong to the mother.
No, I'm dashed if you have. I'll fight for the ownership of my own children tooth and nail, and so will a good many other fellows, I can tell you.
It seems to me that they should be divided between the parents. If Cecil wishes any of the children to be his exclusively, he should pay a certain sum for the risk and trouble of bringing them into the world, say £1,000 apiece. The interest on this could go towards the support of the child as long as we live together, but the principal would be my property. In that way, if Cecil took the child away from me, I should at least be paid for what it had cost me.
Edith! Who ever heard of such a thing?
Well, how else do you propose to settle it?
There is such a thing as a favorite child. What about the youngest child, the Benjamin, the child of its parents' matured strength and charity? Always better treated and better loved than the unfortunate eldest children of their youthful ignorance and willfulness. Which parent is to own the youngest child? Payment or no payment?
There's a third party, my lord. There's the child itself. My wife is so fond of her children that they can't call their lives their own. They all run away from home to escape from her. A child hasn't a grown-up person's appetite for affection. A little of it goes a long way with them, and they like a good imitation of it better than the real thing, as every nurse knows.
Are you sure that any of us, young or old, like the real thing as well as we like the artistic imitation of it? Is not the real thing accursed? Are not the best beloved always the good actors, rather than the true sufferers? Is not love always falsified in novels and plays to make it endurable? I have noticed in myself a great delight in pictures of the saints and of Our Lady, but when I fall under that most terrible curse of the priest's lot, the curse of Joseph pursued by the wife of Potiphar, I am invariably repelled and terrified.
Are you now speaking as a saint, Father Anthony, or as a solicitor?
There is no difference. There is not one Christian rule for solicitors and another for saints. Their hearts are alike, and their way of salvation is along the same road.
But few are there be that find it. Can you find it for us, Anthony?
It lies broad before you. It is the way to destruction that is narrow and tortuous. Marriage is an abomination which the church is founded to cast out and replace by the communion of saints. I learned that from very marriage settlement I drew up as a solicitor, no less than from inspired revelation. You have set yourselves here to put your sin before you in black and white, and you can't agree upon or endure one article of it.
It's certainly rather odd that the whole thing seems to fall to pieces the moment you touch it.
You see, when you give the devil fair play, he loses his case. He has not been able to produce even the first clause of a working agreement. So, I'm afraid we can't wait for him any longer.
Then the community will have to do without my children.
And Cecil shall have to do without me.
And I positively will not marry St. John if he is not clever enough to make some provision for my looking after Reggie.
And the world will come to an end with this generation, I suppose.
Can't nothing be done, my lord?
You can make divorce reasonable and decent. That is all.
Thank you for nothing. If you will only make marriage reasonable and decent, you can do as you like about divorce. I have not stated my deepest objection to marriage, and I don't intend to. There are certain rights I will not give any person over me.
Well, I think it jolly hard that a man should support his wife for years and lose the chance of getting a real good wife, and then have her refuse to be a wife to him.
I'm not going to discuss it with you, Reggie. If your sense of personal honor doesn't make you understand, nothing will.
I'm still awaiting my instructions.
I suppose, after all, marriage is better than, well, than the usual alternative.
What right have you to say so? You know that the sins that are wasting and maddening this unhappy nation are those committed in wedlock.
Well, the single ones can't afford to indulge their affections in the same as married people.
Away with it all, I say. I have your master's commandments. Obey them.
I really must point out to you, Father Anthony, that the early Christians' rules of life were not made to last, because the early Christians did not believe that the world itself was going to last. Now, we know that we shall have to go through with it. We have found that there are millions of years behind us, and we know that there are millions of years before us. Mrs. Bridgenorth's question remains unanswered. How is the world to go on? You say that that is our business, that it is the business of providence. But the modern Christian view is that we are here to do the business of providence and nothing else. The question is how? Am I to use my reason to find out why? Isn't that what my reason is for? Well, all my reason tells me at present is that you are an impractical lunatic.
Does that help?
No.
Then pray for light.
No, I am a snob, not a beggar.
We don't seem to be getting on, do we? Miss Edith, you and Mr. Sykes had better go off to church and settle the right and wrong of it afterwards. It'll ease your minds, believe me. I speak from experience. You will burn your boats, as one might say.
Oh, we should never burn our boats. It is death in life.
Well, Father, I will say for you that you have your views of your own and are not afraid to be out with them. But some of us are more cheerful disposition. On the Borough Council now, you would be in a minority of one. You must take human nature as it is.
Upon what compulsion must I? I'll take divine nature as it is. I'll not hold a candle to the devil.
That's a very unchristian way of treating the devil.
Well, we don't seem to be getting any further, do we?
Will you give it up and get married, Edith?
No. What I propose to me seems quite reasonable.
And you, Lesbia?
Never.
Never is a long word, Lesbia. Don't say it.
Don't pity me, Alice, please. As I said before, I am an English lady, quite prepared to do what without anything I can't have on honorable conditions.
I'm still awaiting my instructions.
Well, we don't seem to be getting along, do we?
You said that before, Reggie. Do not repeat yourself.
Oh, bother.
So much for the contract. By your leave there, gentlemen, make way for the mayoress. Way for the worshipful, the mayoress, my lords and gentlemen.
Mrs. George, my lord.
Here is your ring, my lord, and here am I. It's your doing, remember, not mine.
Good of you to come.
How do you do, Mrs. Collins?
Are you his wife?
The bishop's wife? Yes.
What a destiny, and you look like any other woman.
My sister, Miss Grantham.
So strangely mixed up with the story of life.
You know the story of his life, then?
Not all. We reached the house before he brought it up at the present day, but enough to know the part he played in Grantham.
Mrs. Reginald Bridgenorth.
The late Mrs. Reginald Bridgenorth.
Hold your tongue, Reggie. At least have the decency to wait until the decree is made absolute.
Well, you've more time to get married again than he has, haven't you?
Mr. St. John HOTCHKISS.
What? That? Young man, do you remember coming into my shop and telling me that my husband's coals were out of place in your cellar, as nature evidently intended them for the roof?
Yes, I remember that deplorable impertinence with shame and confusion. You were kind enough to answer that Mr. Collins was looking out for a clever young man to write advertisements, and that I could take the job if I liked.
It's still open.
My daughter, Edith.
The bride. You're not going to get married like that, are you?
That's just what we are discussing. Will you be so good as to join us and allow us the benefit of your wisdom and experience?
Do you want to the beadle as well? He's a married man.
We think there are already too many men to be quite fair to the women.
Right, my lord. Take away that bauble, Joseph. Wait for me wherever you find yourself most comfortable in the neighborhood. Hello, Bill, go and hunt up a drink for Joseph. There's the dear. What, another uniform? Are you the sexton?
My chaplain, Father Anthony.
Oh, Lord.
I mind nothing but my duties.
You know everybody now, I think.
Who's this?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Cecil, Mr. Sykes, the bridegroom.
Adorned for the sacrifice, aren't you?
It seems doubtful whether there's going to be any sacrifice.
Well, I want to talk to the women first. Shall we go upstairs and look at the presents and desserts? And the dresses?
If you wish, certainly.
But the men want to hear what you have to say too.
I'll talk to them afterward, one by one.
Great heavens.
This way, Mrs. Collins.
Shall we try to get through the last batch of letters whilst they are away, Soames?
Yes, certainly. Excuse me.
Cecil, Reggie, I'm frightfully sorry to desert you on this day, but I must bolt. This time it really is pure cowardice. I can't help it.
What are you afraid of?
I don't know. Listen to me. When I was a young fool living by myself in London, I ordered my first ton of coals from that woman's husband. At the time, I did not know that it is not true economy to buy the lowest priced article. I thought all coals were alike, and I tried the 13-shilling kind because it seemed cheap. It proved unexpectedly inferior to the family silkstone, and in the irritation into which the first scuttle threw me, I called at the shop and made an idiot of myself as she described.
Well, suppose you did. Laugh at it, man.
At that, yes. But there was something worse. Judge of my horror when, calling on the coal merchant to make a trifling complaint at the finding my grate acting as a battery of quick-firing guns and being confronted by his vulgar wife, I felt in her presence an extraordinary sensation of unrest, of emotion, of unsatisfied need. I'll not discuss the details of the madness and the folly that followed that meeting, but it went as far as this, that I actually found myself prowling past the shop at night under a sort of desperate necessity to be near some place where she had been. A hideous temptation to kiss the doorstep because her foot had pressed it made me realize how mad I was. I tore myself away from London by a supreme effort, but I was on the point of returning like a needle to a lodestone when the outbreak of war saved me. On the field of battle, the infatuation wore off. The Billiter affair made me a new man. I felt that I had left the follies and puerilities of the old days behind me forever. But half an hour ago, when the bishop sent off that ring, a sudden grip at the base of my heart filled me with a nameless terror. Me, the fearless. I recognized its cause when she walked into the room. Cecil, this woman is a harpy, a siren, a mermaid, a vampire. There is only one chance for me: flight, instant, precipitate flight. Make my excuses, forgive me, farewell. Too late, I am lost.
Do, man. He needs it badly. Come along, Sykes.
Huh?
Mr. BRIDGENORTH, will you oblige me by leaving me with this young man? I want to talk to him, like a mother, on your business.
Do, ma'am. He needs it badly. Come along, Sykes.
Huh?
Too late. You can't save me now, Cecil. Go. Unless to prolong the agony, fatal woman, if woman you are indeed and not a fiend in human form.
Is this out of a book, or is your usual society small talk?
Jibes are useless. The force that is sweeping me away will not spare you. I must know the worst at once. What was your father?
A licensed victualler who married his barmaid. You would call him a publican, most likely.
Then you are a woman totally beneath me. Do you deny it? Do you set up any sort of pretense to be my equal in rank, in age, in culture?
Have you eaten anything that has disagreed with you?
Inferior.
Thank you. Anything else?
this. I love you. My intentions are not honorable. Scream, ring the bell, have me turned out of the house.
Oh, if you could restore to this wasted, exhausted heart one ray of the passion that once welled up at the glance, at the touch of a lover. It's you who would scream then, young man. Do you see this face, once fresh and rosy like your own, now scarred and riven by 100 burnt-out fires?
Slate fires, 13 shillings a ton. Fires that shoot out with destructive meteors, blinding and burning, sending men to the streets to make fools of themselves.
You seem to have got it pretty bad, St. John.
Don't you dare call me St. John.
My name is Zenobia Alexandrina. You may call me Polly for short.
Your name is Ashtoreth Durga. There is no name yet invented malign enough for you.
Come, do you really think you're better suited to that young sauce box than her husband? You enjoyed her company when you were only the friend of the family, when there was the husband there to shoo off against and to take all the responsibility. Are you sure you'll enjoy it as much when you are the husband? She isn't clever, you know. She's only a silly clever.
Need you tell me, fiend that you are?
You amused the husband, didn't you?
He has more real sense of humor than she. He's better bred. That was not my fault.
My husband has a sense of humor too.
The coal merchant, I mean the slate merchant.
He would just love to hear you talk. He's been dull lately for want of a change of company and a bit of fresh fun.
And pray, what is your wretched husband's vulgar conviviality to me?
You love me.
I loathe you.
It's the same thing.
Then I'm lost.
You may come and see me if you promise to amuse George.
I'll insult him, sneer at him, wipe my boots on him.
No, you won't, dear boy. You'll be a perfect gentleman.
Zenobia.
Polly, please.
Mrs. Collins.
Sir.
Something stronger than my reason and common sense is holding my hands and tearing me along. I make no attempt to deny that it can drag me where you please and make me do what you like. But at least let me know your soul as you seem to know mine. Do you love this absurd coal merchant?
Call him George.
Do you love your Georgie Porgy?
Oh, I don't know that I love him. He's my husband, you know, but if I got anxious about George's health and I thought it would nourish him, I would fry you with onions for his breakfast and think nothing of it. George and I are great friends. George belongs to me. Other men may come and go, but George goes on forever.
Yes, a husband soon becomes nothing but a habit. Listen, I suppose this detestable fascination you have for me is love?
Any sort of feeling for a woman is called love nowadays.
Do you love me?
My love is not quite so cheap an article as that, my lad. I wouldn't cross the street to have another look at you. Not yet. I'm not starving for love like the robins in winter, as the good ladies you're accustomed to are. You'll have to be very clever and very good and very real if you are to interest me. If George takes a fancy to you and you amuse him enough, I'll just tolerate you coming in and out occasionally for, well, say a month. If you can make a friend of me in that time, so much the better for you. If you can touch my poor dying heart, even for an instant, I'll bless you and never forget you. You may try if George takes to you.
I'm to come on liking for a month?
On condition that you drop Mrs. Reginald.
But she won't drop me. Do you suppose I ever wanted to marry her? I was a homeless bachelor, and I felt quite happy at their house as their friend. Leo was an amusing little devil, but I liked Reginald much more than I liked her. She didn't understand. One day she came to me and told me that the inevitable had happened. I had tact enough not to ask her what the inevitable was, and I gathered presently that she had told Reginald that their marriage was a mistake and that she loved me and could no longer see me breaking my heart for her in suffering silence. Well, what could I say? What could I do? What can I say now? What can I do now?
Tell her that the habit of falling in love with other men's wives is growing on you, and that I'm your latest.
What? Throw her over when she's thrown Reginald over for me?
You won't then. Very well. Sorry we shan't meet again. I should have liked to see more of you for George's sake. Goodbye.
Zenobia.
I thought I had made a difficult conquest. Now I see you are only one of those poor petticoat hunting creatures that any woman can pick up. Not for me, thank you.
Oh, don't be an ass, Polly.
That's better.
Can't you see that I mayn't throw Leo over just because I should be only too glad to? It would be dishonorable.
Will you be happy if you marry her?
No, great heaven, no!
Will she be happy when she finds you out?
She's incapable of happiness, but she's not incapable of the pleasure of holding a man against his will.
Right, young man. You will tell her, please, that you love me. Before everybody, and the very next time you see her.
But
those are my orders, St. John. I can't have you marry another woman until George is tired of you.
oh, if I only didn't selfishly want to obey you.
Where have you been all this time?
I'm afraid my nerves were a little upset by our conversation.
More.
I just went into the garden and had a smoke. I'm all right now.
A smoke? Why, you said she couldn't bear it.
Good heavens, I forgot. It's such a natural thing to do somehow.
He's been smoking again.
Lesbia. Lesbia.
And smoking again.
So my nose tells me.
Lesbia, I'm very sorry, but if I gave it up, I should become so melancholy and irritable that you would be the first to implore me to take it again.
That's true. Women drive their husbands into all sorts of wickedness to keep them in good humor. St. John, be off with you. This doesn't concern you.
Please don't disturb yourself, St. John. Box's broken heart has been worn on his sleeve too long for any pretense of privacy.
Oh, you are cruel, Lesbia, devilishly cruel.
You are vulgar, Boxer.
In what way? I ask as an expert in vulgarity.
In two ways. First, he talks as if the only thing of any importance in life was which particular woman he shall marry. Second, he has no self-control.
Women are not all the same to me, Lesbia.
Why should they be, pray? Women are all different. It's the men who are all the same. Besides, what does Miss Grantham know about either men or women? She's got too much self-control.
And pray, how does that prevent me from knowing as much about men and women as people who have no self-control?
Because it frightens people into behaving themselves before you. And then how can you tell what they really are? Look at me. I was a spoiled child. My brothers and sisters were well brought up, like all children of respectable publicans. So should I have been, if I hadn't been the youngest, 10 years younger than my youngest brother? My parents were tired of doing their duty by their children by that time, and they spoiled me for all they were worth. I never knew what it was to want money or anything that money could buy. When I wanted my own way, I had nothing to do but scream for it till I got it. When I was annoyed, I didn't control myself. I scratched and called names. Did you ever, after you were grown up, pull a grown-up woman's hair? Did you ever bite a grown-up man? Did you ever call both of them every name you could lay your tongue to?
No.
Well, I did. I know what a woman is like when her hair's pulled. I know what a man is like when he's bit. I know what they're both like when you tell them what you really feel about them. And that's how I know more of the world than you.
The Chinese know what a man is like when he is cut into 1,000 pieces or boiled in oil. That sort of knowledge is of no use to me. I'm afraid we shall never get on with one another, Mrs. George. I live like a fencer, always on guard. I like to be confronted with people who are always on guard. I hate sloppy people, slovenly people, people who can't sit up straight, sentimental people.
Oh, sentimental, your grandmother. You don't learn to hold your own in the world by standing on guard, but by attacking and getting well hammered yourself.
I'm not a prize fighter, Mrs. Collins. If I can't get a thing without the indignity of fighting for it, I do without it.
Do you? Does it strike you that if we were all as clever as you at doing without, there wouldn't be much to live for, would there be?
I'm afraid, Lesbia, the things you do without are the things you don't want.
That's not bad, the poor silly soldier man. Yes, Boxer, the truth is, I don't want you enough to make the very unreasonable sacrifices required by marriage. And yet that is exactly why I ought to be married. Just because I have the qualities my country wants most, I shall go barren to my grave, whilst the women who have neither the strength to resist marriage nor the intelligence to understand its infinite dishonor will make the England of the future.
Well, I shall not ask you again, Lesbia.
Thank you, Boxer.
You're quite done with him, are you?
As far as marriage is concerned, yes. The field is clear for you, Mrs. George.
She's a nice woman, that, and a sort of beauty about her, too. Different from anybody else.
Oh, Mrs. Collins, thank you 1,000 times. You have thawed the long frozen springs. Forgive me and thank you. Bless you.
Up the dear old warrior on the bounce, eh?
Unfaithful to me already?
I'm not your property, young man, don't you think it? You understand that? Oh, you dare do that again, you young blackguard? And I'll jab one of those chairs in your face. Now you shall not see me for another month.
I shall pay my first visit to your husband this afternoon.
You'll see what he'll say to you when I tell him what you've just done.
What can he say? What dare he say?
Suppose he kicks you out of the house.
How can he? I've fought 7 duels with sabers. I've muscles of iron. Nothing hurts me, not even broken bones. Fighting is absolutely uninteresting to me because it doesn't frighten me or amuse me, as I always win. Your husband is, in all these respects, an average man probably. He will be horribly afraid of me, and if under the stimulus of your presence and for your sake, and because it is the right thing to do among vulgar people, if he were to attack me, I could simply defeat him and humiliate him. Sooner than expose him to that, you would suffer 1,000 stolen kisses, wouldn't you?
You young viper.
You are in my power. This is one of the oversights of your code of honor for husbands. The man who can bully them can insult the wives with impunity. Tell him if you dare, if I choose to take 10 kisses, how will you prevent me?
You come within reach of me, and I'll not leave a hair on your head.
I've got your hands.
You've not got my teeth. Let go or I'll bite. I will, I tell you, let go.
Bite away. I shall taste quite as nice as George.
You beast, let me go. Do you call yourself a gentleman to use your brute strength against a woman?
You are stronger than me in every way but this. Do you think I will give up my one advantage? Promise you'll receive me when I call this afternoon.
After what you've just done, not if it was to save my life.
I'll amuse George.
He won't be in.
Do you mean that we should be alone?
Aha! That's cooled you, has it?
When will George be at home?
It won't matter to you whether he's at home or not. The door will be slammed in your face whenever you call.
No servant in London is strong enough to close the door that I mean to keep open. You can't escape me. If you persist, I'll go into the coal trade, make George's acquaintance on the coal exchange, and coax him to take me to his home with him and make your acquaintance.
We have no use for you, young man, neither George nor I.
Yes, you have. George can't fight for you. I can.
You bully, you low bully.
You have courage and fascination. I have courage and a pair of fists. We're both bullies, Polly.
You have a mischievous tongue. That's enough to keep you out of my house.
It must be rather a house of cards. A word from me and George, just the right word, said the right way, and down comes your house.
That's why I'll die sooner than let you into it.
Then, as surely as you live, I enter the coal trade tomorrow. George's taste for amusing company will deliver him into my hands. Before a month passes, your home will be at my mercy.
Do you think I'll let myself be driven into a trap like this?
You are in it already. Marriage is a trap. You are married. Any man who has the power to spoil your marriage has the power to spoil your life. I have that power over you.
You mean it?
I do.
Well, spoil my marriage and be...
Polly?
Sooner than be your slave, I'll face any unhappiness.
What? Even for George?
There must be honor between me and George. Happiness or no happiness. Do your worst.
Are you really game, Polly? Dare you defy me?
If you ask me another question, I shan't be able to keep my hands off you.
That settles it, Polly. I adore you. We were born for one another. I happen to be a gentleman. I'll never do anything to annoy or injure you, except that I reserve the right to give you a black eye if you bite me. But You'll never get rid of me now to the end of your life.
I shall get rid of you if the beadle has to brain you with a mace for it.
You shan't.
Shan't I, though?
No, you shan't. I have one card left to play that you've forgotten. Why were you so unlike yourself when you spoke to the bishop?
Stop. Not that. You shall respect that if you respect nothing else, I forbid you. What are you doing? Get up. Don't be a fool.
Harley, I ask you on my knees to let me make George's acquaintance in your home this afternoon. I shall remain on my knees till the bishop comes in and sees us. What will he think of you then?
Where's the poker? She refuses to the fireplace. Sorry. Where's the poker?
Don't hit him, Mrs. Collins. He is my guest. Come, come. You are in the house of your friends. Can we help you?
Go in there, you. You're not wanted here.
You understand, Bishop, that Mrs. Collins is not to blame for this scene. I'm afraid I have been rather irritating.
I can quite believe it, St. John. I'm sorry you have been worried. Never mind him. A little pluck, a little gaiety of heart, a little prayer, and you'll be laughing at him.
Never fear. I have all. It was as much my fault as his, and I should have put him in his place with the clip of that poker on the side of his head if you hadn't come in.
You might have put him in his coffin that way, Mrs. Collins, and I should have been very sorry because we are all fond of St. John.
Yes, it's your duty to but do you think I don't know?
I don't rebuke you. Who am I that I should rebuke you? Besides, I know there are discussions in which the poker is the only possible argument.
My lord, be earnest with me. I'm a very funny woman. I dare say, but I come from the same workshop as you. I heard you say that yourself years ago.
Quite so. But then I'm a very funny bishop. Since we are both funny people, let us not forget that humor is a divine attribute.
I know nothing about divine attributes, or whatever you call them, but I feel when I am being belittled. It was from you that I learned first to respect myself. It was though you that I came to be able to walk safely through my many wild and willful paths. Don't go back on your own teaching.
I'm not a teacher, only a fellow traveler of whom you asked the way. I pointed ahead of myself as well as of you.
As I am a living woman this day, if I find you out to be a fraud, I'll kill myself.
What? Kill yourself? For finding out something? For becoming a wiser and therefore better woman? What a bad reason.
I have sometimes thought of killing you and then killing myself.
Why on earth should you kill yourself, not to mention me?
So that we might keep our assignation in heaven.
Mrs. Collins, oh, you are incognita appassionata.
You read my letters then. Thank you.
In the spell by making you come here. Can you ever forgive me?
You couldn't know that only the coal merchant's wife could.
Why do you say only the coal merchant's wife?
Many people would laugh at it.
Poor people. It's so hard to know the right place to laugh, isn't it?
I didn't mean to make you think. The letters were from a fine lady. I wrote on cheap paper, and I never could spell.
Neither could I. So, that told me nothing.
One thing I should like you to know.
Yes?
We didn't cheat your friend. They were as good as we could do at 13 shillings a ton.
That's important. Thank you for telling me.
I have something else to say, but will you please ask somebody to come and stay here while we talk? Not a woman, if you don't mind. Not a man either.
Not a man and not a woman. We have no children left, Mrs. Collins. They have all grown up and married.
That other clergyman would do.
What? The sexton?
Yes, he didn't mind my calling him, did he? It was only my ignorance.
Not at all. Soames, Anthony, call him father, he likes it. Mrs. Collins wishes you to join us, Anthony.
You don't mind, Dad, do you? That was what you told me to call him, wasn't it?
Father Soames. Father? Did we lose the father? Tom? Somebody?
Right. I am called Father Anthony, Mrs. Collins, but it does not matter what you call me.
Mrs. Collins has something to say to me that she wants you to hear.
I'm listening.
Now.
My lord, you should never have married.
This woman is inspired. Listen to her, my lord.
I married because I was so much in love with Alice that all the difficulties and doubts and dangers of marriage seemed to me to be the merest moonshine.
Yes, it's mean to let poor things in for so much while they're in that state. Would you marry now that you know better if you were a widower?
I'm old now, it wouldn't matter.
But would you do it if it mattered?
I think I would marry again, lest anyone should imagine I had found marriage unhappy with Alice.
Are you fonder of your wife than of your salvation?
Oh, very much. When you meet a man who is very particular about his salvation, look out for a woman who is very particular about her character and marry them to one another. They'll make a perfect pair. I advise you to fall in love, Anthony.
Page 93.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes, you. Think of what it would do for you. For her sake, you would come to care unselfishly and diligently for money instead of being selfishly and lazily indifferent to it. For her sake, you would come to care in the same way for preferment. For her sake, you would come to care for your health, your appearance, your good opinion of your fellow creatures, and all the really important things that make men work and strive instead of mooning and nursing their salvation.
In one word, for the sake of one deadly sin, I should come to care for all the others.
Saint Anthony. Tempt him, Mrs. Collins. Tempt him.
Take care, my lord. You still have the power to make me obey your commands. And do you, Mr. Sexton, beware of an...
Yes, nature abhors a bathroom. Nature abhors a vacuum, Anthony. I would not dare go about with an empty heart. Why, the first girl I met would fly into it by mere atmospheric pressure. Alice keeps them out now. Mrs. Collins knows.
I know more than either of you. One of you has enjoyed first love, has not yet reached it, but I...
What's the matter? Are you ill, Mrs. Collins? Soames, is there a glass of water in the study? Quick, get that.
No, don't call. Don't bring anyone. Can't you hear anything?
Oh, nothing unusual.
No music?
No.
Do you see nothing, not a great light?
We are still walking in darkness.
Put your hand on my forehead, the hand with the ring.
There was a certain woman, the wife of a coal merchant, which had been a great sinner.
You prophesy falsely, Anthony. Never in my life have I done anything that was not ordained for me. I've been myself. I've been afraid of, and at last I have escaped from myself. And I have become a voice for them that are afraid to speak. A cry for the hearts that break in silence.
Is she inspired?
Marvelous. Hush.
I have earned the right to speak. I have dared. I have gone through. I have not fallen withered in the fire. I have come at last out beyond to the back.
And what do you see there at the back of Godspeed?
What's your message?
When you loved me, I gave you the whole sun and stars to play with. I gave you eternity in a single moment. Strength of the mountains in one clasp of your arms, and the volume of all the seas in one impulse of your souls. A moment only, but was it not enough? Were you not paid then for all the rest of your struggle on earth? Must I mend your clothes and sweep your floors as well? Was it not enough? I paid the price without bargaining. I bore the children without flinching. Was that a reason for heaping fresh burdens on me? I carried the child in my arms. Must I carry the father too? When I opened the gates of paradise, were you blind? Was it nothing to you? When all the stars sang in your ears and all the winds swept you into the heart of heaven, were you deaf? Were you dull? Was I no more to you than a bone to a dog? Was it not enough? We spent eternity together, and you asked me for a little lifetime more. We possessed all the universe together, and you asked me to give you my scanty wages as well. I have given you the greatest of all things, and you asked me to give you little things. I gave you your own soul. You asked me for my body as a plaything. Was it not enough? Was it not enough?
I understand this, my lord.
I have the advantage over you, Anthony, thanks to Alice. Your hand is very cold. Can you come down to earth? Do you remember who I am and who you are?
It was enough for me. I did not ask to meet you, to touch you. When you spoke to my soul years ago from your pulpit, you opened the doors of my salvation to me, and now they stand open forever. It was enough. I have asked you for nothing since. I ask you for nothing now. I have lived. It is enough. I have had my wages, and I am ready for my work. I thank you and bless and leave you. You are happier in that than I am. For when I do for men what you did for me, I have no thanks and no blessing. I am their prey, and there is no rest from their loving and no mercy from their loathing.
You must take us as we are, Mrs. Collins.
No, take us as we are capable of becoming.
Take me as I am. I ask no more. Yes, come in, come in.
Will you be so kind as to tell me whether I am dreaming? In there, I have heard Mrs. Collins saying the strangest things, and not a syllable from you two.
My lord, is this possession by the devil?
Or the ecstasy of a saint?
Or the convulsion of a pythoness on a tripod.
May not the three be one?
You are paining and tiring me with the idle questions. You are dragging me back to myself. You are tormenting me with your evil dreams of saints and devils. And what was it? The pythons? I don't understand. A human creature like yourselves, will you not take me as I am?
Yes, but shall we take you and burn you?
Or take you and canonize you?
Take you as a matter of course. We must get her out of this. It's dangerous. May I suggest that you shall be Antony's devil, the bishop's saint, and my adored Polly.
Well, who kissed my hand? Was it you? I beg your pardon.
Not at all. I am not repudiating that honor. Allow me.
Thank you for that. It was not the sexton, was it?
I.
It was I, Polly, your ever faithful.
Let me catch you doing it again, that's all. How do you come there? I sent you away. What gracious has been happening?
As far as I can make out, you have been having a very charming and eloquent sort of fit.
What? My second night? Oh, how I have prayed that it would come to me if ever I met you. And now it has come. How stunning. I believe every word I said. I can't remember it now. But it was something that was just bursting to me. And it laid hold of me and said it itself. That's how it is, you see.
Have you been out, my dear?
Yes.
With Cecil?
Yes.
And have you come to an understanding?
You had better tell them, Edie.
Tell them yourself.
Oh, can anybody oblige me with some tobacco? I finished mine and my nerves are still far from settled.
Wait a moment, Boxer. Cecil has something important to tell us.
We've done it, that's all.
Done what, Cecil?
Well, what do you suppose?
Got married, of course.
Married? Who gave you away?
This gentleman did. Oh, I thought he came in with us. Has he gone downstairs, I suppose? The Beadle.
The Beadle? What the devil did he do that for?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't make any bargain with him. How much ought I to give him, Mrs. Collins?
5 shillings. I want to rest for a moment there in your study. I say it here. I saw it here.
By all means, turn my brother out if he disturbs you. Soames, bring the letters out here.
He won't be offended at my offering it, will he?
Not he. It touches children with a mace to pour them warm for 4d apiece.
Well, Edith, I'm a little disappointed, I must say. However, I'm glad it was done by somebody in a public uniform.
Alice, my love. They're married.
Oh, well, that's all right. Better tell Collins.
You have both given in, have you?
Not at all. We have provided for everything.
How, says Soames.
Before going to the church, we went to the office of that insurance company. What's its name, Cecil?
The British Family Insurance Corporation. It insures you against poor relations and all sorts of family contingencies.
It has consented to insure Cecil against libel actions brought against him on my account. It will give us specially low terms because I am a bishop's daughter.
And I have given Edie my solemn word that if I ever commit a crime, I'll knock her down before a witness and go off to Brighton with another lady.
That's what you call providing for everything?
You can see that there are no worms before he knocks you down, Edith.
Where's Reggie?
I'm right here, but I can't turn on my video because the host stopped it. Here, what's the matter?
What's the matter? You may well ask. While Edie and Cecil were at the insurance office, I took a taxi and went off to your lodgings. And a nice mess I found everything in. Your clothes are in a disgraceful state. Your liver pad has been made into a kettle holder. You're no more fit to be left to yourself than a one-year-old baby.
Oh, I can't be bothered looking after things like that. I'm all right.
You're not. You're a disgrace. You never consider that you're a disgrace to me. You only think of yourself. You must come home with me and be taken proper care of. My conscience will not allow me to let you live like a pig. You must stay with me until I marry St. John, and we can adopt you or something.
No, I'm dashed. I'll be adopted by St. John. You can adopt him if you like.
I suggest that that would really be the better plan, Leo. I have a confession to make to you. I'm not the man you took me for. Your objection to Reggie was that he had low tastes.
Was it? By George.
I said slovenly habits. I never thought he had really low tastes until I saw that woman in court. How could he have chosen such a creature and let her write to him after?
Is this fair? I never.
Of course you didn't, Reggie. Don't be silly. Leo, it's I who really have low tastes.
You?
I've fallen in love with a coal merchant's wife. I adore her. I would rather have one of her bootlaces than a lock of your hair.
You damn scoundrel. How dare you throw my wife over like that before my face?
Don't take any notice of him, Reggie. Go at once and get that odious decree demolished or annulled or whatever it is. Tell Sir Gorrel Barnes that I have changed my mind. I might have known that you were too clever to be really a gentleman. Ugh.
All the problems appear to be solving themselves.
Except mine.
Oh, but my dear Lesbia, you see what has happened here today? Now I put it to you, does it not show you the folly of not marrying?
No, I can't say it does. And you have been smoking again.
Drive me to it, Lesbia, I can't help it.
Well, I won't scold you today. I feel in a particularly good humor just now.
Oh, may I ask why, Lesbia?
Just to think that after all the dangers of the morning, I am still unmarried, still independent, still my own mistress, still a glorious, strong-minded old maid of old England.
Do you find any real happiness in being your own mistress? Would it not be more generous? Would you not be happier as someone else's mistress?
Boxer?
No. You must know, my dear Lesbia, that I was not using the word in its improper sense. Sometimes unfortunate in my choice of expressions, but you know what I mean. I feel sure you would be happier as my wife.
I dare say I should, in a frowsy sort of way, but I prefer my dignity and my independence. I'm afraid I think this rage for happiness rather vulgar.
Oh, very well, Lesbia. I shall not ask you again.
You will, Boxer, but it will be of no use. Someday I hope to make a friend of you, and then we shall get on very nicely.
Ah, I think you are hard, Lesbia. I shall make a fool of myself if I remain here, Alice. I shall go into the garden for a while.
I think everything is in order now, ma'am.
Oh, by the way, could you oblige me?
Oh, certainly, General.
I don't believe there's a man in England who really and truly loves his wife as much as he loves his pipe.
By the way, what's happened to the wedding party?
I don't know. There wasn't a soul in the church when we were married except the pew opener and the curate who did the job.
They had all gone home.
But the bridesmaids?
Oh, me and the Beadle have been all over the place in a couple of taxis, ma'am, and we've collected them all. They were a good deal disappointed on account of their dresses and thought it rather irregular, but they'd agreed to come to the breakfast. The truth is they're wild with curiosity to know how it all happened. The organist held on until the organ was nigh worn out and himself worse than the organ. He asked me particularly to tell you, my lord, that he held back Mendelssohn till the very last. But when that was gone, he thought he might as well go too. So he played God Save the King and cleared out the church. He's coming to a breakfast to explain.
Collins, that there is no truth whatever in the rumor that I am separated from my husband, or that there is or has ever been anything between me and Mr. HOTCHKISS.
Oh, bless you, Mom. One could always see that. Will you receive her here or in the hall, ma'am?
In the hall, Alfred. You and Boxer must go there and be ready to keep the first arrivals talking till we come. We have to dress, Edith. Come, Lesbia. Come, Leo. We must all help. Now, Edith.
More. More. Alice. Alice, the Collins line.
Collins, we shall want you when Miss Edith's dressed to look over her veil and things and see that they are all right.
Oh, yes, Mom. Anything you would like mentioned about Miss Labia, Mom? Lesbia.
No.
Sorry.
No. No, she won't have the general. I think you may take that as final.
Oh, what a pity, Mom. A fine lady wasted, Mom.
I'm going to the hall, Collins, to receive. Reggie, go and tell Boxer and come both of you to help with the small talk. Come, Cecil.
You've always talked a precious lot about behaving like a gentleman. Well, if you think you behave like a gentleman to Leo, you're mistaken. And I shall have to take her part, remember that.
I understand your doors are closed to me.
Oh, no, don't be hasty. I think I should like you to drop in after a while, you know. She gets so cross and upset when there's nobody to liven up the house a bit.
I'll do my best.
Oh, righto. You won't mind, old chap, do you?
It's faith. I've touched coal, but my hands are black, but they're clean. So long, Reggie.
Excuse me, sir, but do you stay to breakfast? Your name is on one of the covers, and I should like to change if you're not remaining.
How do I know? Is my destiny any longer in my own hands? No. Go ask she who must be obeyed.
Has Mrs. George taken a fancy to you, sir?
Would she had. Worse, man. Worse. I've taken a fancy to Mrs. George.
Oh, don't despair, sir. If George likes your conversation, you'll find the house a very pleasant one. Livelier than Mr. Reginald's, I dare say.
Polly?
Oh, it's come to Polly already. Sir, I should say you were all right.
Your brother-in-law wishes to know whether I'm to stay for the wedding breakfast. Tell him.
He stays, Bill, if he chooses to behave himself.
May I, as a friend of the family, have the privilege of calling you Bill?
With pleasure, I'm sure, sir.
My own pet name in the bosom of my family is Sonny.
Why didn't you tell me that before? Sonny is just the name I wanted for you. Bill, I'm not going into the hall until there are enough people there to make a proper little court for me. Send the beadle for me when you think it looks good enough.
Right, Mom.
The bishop said I was to tempt you, Anthony.
Woman, go away.
Anthony, when other lips and other hearts their tale of love shall tell.
Yes, the language whose expresses the in language whose excess imparts the power they feel so well.
Though hollow hearts may wear a mask, would break your own to see. In such a moment, I but ask that you'll remember me, and you will, Anthony. I shall put my spell on you.
Do you think that a man who has sung the Magnificat and adored the Queen of Heaven has any ears for such trash as that, or any eyes for such trash as you, saving your poor little soul's presence? Go home to your duties, woman.
Anthony, I adopt you as my father. That's the talk. Give me a man whose whole life doesn't hang on some scrubby woman in the next street, and I'll never let him go.
That's enough. You have another man to talk to. I'm busy.
Why aren't you like him, Sonny? Why do you hang on to a scrubby woman in the next street?
I must apologize to Billiter.
Who is Billiter?
A man who eats rice pudding with a spoon. I've been eating rice pudding with a spoon ever since I saw you first. We all eat our rice pudding with a spoon, don't we, Soames?
We are members of one another. There is no need to refer to me. In the first place, I'm busy. In the second, you will find it all in the Church Catechism, which contains most of the new discoveries with which the age is bursting. Of course, you should apologize to Billiter. He is your equal. He will go to the same heaven if he behaves himself, and to the same hell if he doesn't.
And so will my husband, the coal merchant.
If I were your husband's superior here, I should be his superior in heaven or hell. Equality lies deeper than that. The coal merchant and I are in love with the same woman. That settles the question for me forever.
You don't believe in women, do you, Anthony? He might as well say that he and George both like fried fish.
I do not like fried fish. Don't be low, Polly.
Woman, do not presume to accuse me of unbelief, and do you, Hotchkiss, not despise this woman's soul because she speaks of fried fish. Some of the victims of the miraculous draught of fishes were fried, and I eat fried fish every Friday and like it. You are as ingrained a snob as ever.
My dear Anthony, I find you merely ridiculous as a preacher because you keep referring to me to places and documents and alleged occurrences in which, as a matter of fact, I don't believe. I don't believe in anything but my own will and my own pride and honor. your fishes and your catechisms and all the rest of it make a charming poem, which you call your faith. To perfection, but it doesn't fit me. I happen, like Napoleon, to prefer Mohammedism. Religion is a great force, the only real motive force in the world. But what you fellows don't understand is that you must get at a man through his own religion and not through yours. Instead of facing the fact, you persist in trying to convert all men to your own little sect so that you can use it against them afterwards. You are all missionaries and proselytizers, trying to uproot the native religion from your neighbor's flower beds and plant your own in its place. You would rather let a child perish in ignorance than have it taught a rival's sectary. You can talk to me of all the quintessential equality of coal merchants and British officers, and yet you can't see the quintessential equity of all religions. Who are you anyhow, that you should know better than Mohammed or Confucius or any of the other Johnnies who have been on this job since the world existed?
George will like you, Sonny. You should hear him talking about the church.
Very well then, go on your doom, both of you. There's only one religion for me, that which my soul knows to be true. But even irreligion has one tenet, and that is the sacredness of marriage. You two are on the verge of deadly sin. Do you deny that?
You forget, Anthony. The marriage itself is a deadly sin according to you.
The question is not now what I believe, but what you believe. Take the vows with me and give up that woman if you have the strength and the light. But if you are still in the grip of this world, at least respect its institutions. Do you believe in marriage or do you not?
My soul is utterly free from any such superstition. I solemnly declare that between this woman, as you impolitely call her, and me, I see no barrier that my conscience bids me respect. I loathe the whole marriage morality of the middle class with all my instincts. If I were an 18th century marquis, I could feel no more free with regard to a Parisian citizen's wife than I do with regard to Polly. I despise all this domestic purity business as the lowest depth of narrow, selfish, sensual, wife-grabbing vulgarity.
Oh, indeed. Then you're not coming home with me, young man. I'm sorry, for it's refreshing to have met once in my life a man who wasn't frightened by my wedding ring. But I'm looking out for a friend, not for a French marquis. So you're not coming home with me.
Yes, I am.
No.
Yes, think again. You know your set pretty well. I suppose your pretty tradesman, petty tradesman set. You know all its scandals and hypocrisies, its jealousies and squabbles, its hundreds of divorce cases that never come into the court, as well as the tens that do.
We're not angels. I know a few scandals, but most of us are too dull to be anything but good.
Then you must have noticed that just as all murderers, judging by their edifying remarks on the scaffold, seem to be devout Christians, so all Christians, both male and female, are individually people overflowing with domestic sentimentality and profession of respect for the conventions they violate in secret.
Well, you don't expect them to give themselves away, do you?
They are people of sentiment, not honor. Now, I am not a man of sentiment, but a man of honor, and I know well what will happen to me when once I cross the threshold of your husband's house and break bread with him. This marriage bond, which I despise, will bind me, as it never seems to bind the people who believe in it, and whose chief amusement is to go to the theaters where it is laughed at. Soames, you're a communist, aren't you?
I am a Christian. That obliges me to be a communist.
And you believe that many of our landed estates were stolen from the church by Henry VIII.
I do not merely believe that. I know it as a lawyer.
Would you steal a turnip from one of the landlords of those stolen lands?
They have no right to their lands.
That is not what I asked you. Would you steal a turnip from one of the fields they have no right to?
I do not like turnips.
As you are a lawyer, answer me.
I admit that I should probably not do so. I should perhaps be wrong not to steal the turnip. I can't defend my reluctance to do so, but I think I should not do so. I know I should not do so.
Neither shall I be able to steal George's wife. I have stretched out my hand for the forbidden fruit, and I know that my hand will always come back empty. To disbelieve in marriage is easy. To love a married woman is easy. But to betray a comrade, to be disloyal to a host, to break the covenant of bread and salt is impossible. You may take me with you, Polly. Home, you have nothing to fear.
And nothing to hope.
Since you put it in that more kind way, Polly, absolutely nothing.
Like most men, you think you know everything a woman wants, don't you? But the thing one wants most has nothing to do with marriage at all. Perhaps Anthony here has a glimmering of it. Eh, Anthony?
Christian fellowship?
You call it that, do you?
What do you call it?
Now, Polly, the hall's full, and they're waiting for you.
Make way there, gentlemen, please. Way for the worshipful, the mayoress. If you please, my lords and gentlemen, by your leave, ladies and gentlemen, way for the mayoress.
End of play.